Welcome to Silver Screen Biases. Each week we pick a movie off of IMDb's Top 250 and dig into it. We're examining truth claims in critically acclaimed movies while also examining our own biases. I'm Nelson. I'm Nelson.
I'm glad you're recording. This is Jeff.
We're not doing a second take. We're just going to leave it.
I love it.
And this week, joining us,
I am Rick.
Yes.
Pastor Rick.
Yes. Ricky Raccoon. Did you ever get that?
All the time.
All the time.
All the time.
Thank you, Full
Yes.
House.
So thank you for reminding me of that.
What other Rick nicknames you get?
Well, unfortunately, my
Ricky
name...
Bobby?
No, never got Ricky Bobby.
Whoa.
So I grew up in the Ricky Tikki Tavi,
Okay.
which
yeah.
isn't that a mongoose, I think?
Yeah, it's about a snake. It's an old children's
I remember
tale,
that. Yeah, and then Ricky Lake.
I don't know who that is.
You're welcome.
She's
Talk
like
show.
Jerry Springer adjacent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
Lady Springer. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll
fun.
go with that. We'll go with that.
Rick,
So, yeah.
we're glad you're here. We'll get into more
Glad to be here,
about your
man.
stats here in a couple seconds here.
Your stats.
Your stats. All your credentials.
your rookie card that we're
Yeah.
making. We're making rookie cards of all of our guests.
Going over your resume.
Sweet. It's not a bad idea.
It's actually not a bad idea.
Collector's
Trading
edition.
cards.
Special
What movie
holographic.
we doing? Nels?
I don't know.
You don't know? Okay.
What?
I watched The Lion King,
Ooh. Which one?
Ooh.
1994.
The real one.
The one that's on the IMDb Top 250.
Yes, correct. The one without Donald Glover.
Or John Favreau.
Yeah.
Donald Glover's in the.
He plays
He's Simba.
adult Simba
Or yeah, adult
in
Simba.
the live action animated CGI version with Beyonce.
Those are some trained animals.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
Which
That's crazy.
okay, but so before we get into this movie, what's your guys' thoughts? Have you guys seen the remake or the
It's fine.
redo?
It's okay.
I think it's visually appealing. I think
Yeah.
like for it to be mostly computer graphics, it's very well done.
I thought the Jungle Book remake was was tiers better.
I have not seen that.
I agree. I like it. It was good. It was okay. But I mean, because like when you look at the original and like screen for screen, it's almost pretty spot on.
Yeah.
But again, it gets kind of weird when you're doing a live remake of something that's all animals.
Yeah.
So I mean,
All right. Well, in preparation for this episode, which version of the 1994 Lion King did you watch? Did you watch the one with Zazu has his own singing number?
No.
no,
If you're watching on Disney Plus, that's the one.
that is the one you get.
That is not the one.
No.
Because I watched it on Disney Plus. And I don't know if like you maybe
Stand
you can
corrected.
pick between versions, but Zazu, he did the I've got a lovely bunch of coconuts. Is that the one you're talking
No,
about?
it's
Okay.
the Morning Report.
Morning Report.
No.
It's a song that was cut from the original.
When the groundhog pops up, he
Yeah.
sings a
Yep.
song.
No,
Yep.
right before that, he
Oh.
sings a whole song.
Yeah,
Oh,
no,
yeah,
no.
that's
That was
right.
I watched on
And,
Disney Plus, and that was not the version I saw.
I was surprised by it when I saw it like a year or so ago. I was like, I don't remember this, and I had looked it up. I was like, that's because it's not in
It's not in the
the
yeah.
theatrical release.
George Lucas.
It's also not very good.
It's
The
pretty
song- it's not
terrible.
bad.
It
I
should
don't know this
stay cut.
song.
It-
don't know this song?
Yes, so much yes on
I-
that one.
And so there was also in the original script for this movie, they had made it to where they were wanting Scar to pursue either Nala or Sarabi, one of them,
Sarabi!
as a not a love interest, but as someone to create an heir. In the original script, and the Broadway show actually
Kept that in.
uses that.
Interesting.
Because him doing
They
that.
just pick somebody out of the audience.
Him doing that, and I'm definitely jumping ahead. We can get back to this later. But him doing that means that Scar exhibits all 7 of the deadly sins in this
Yeah.
movie if he were to have a lust interest.
Interesting.
So that was part of
Interesting.
the addition or the desire to add that is we see 6 of the 7 deadly sins that Scar faces.
yeah, we see sloth.
We see gluttony because everyone else is starving and he's
yeah.
there's envy for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I actually don't know them all off the top of my
Wrath?
head.
Definitely pride.
Yeah. Well,
Pride
yeah,
Rock.
Pride Rock.
Thank
yeah.
you.
All right.
I just thought that was
Interesting.
but we're not even in the nitty gritty yet. But
Hold
I thought that
on.
was a fun fact.
Hold on.
Oh, Nelson is
fact.
pausing.
I'm googling the deadly sins because I want to make sure we cover them all. And
All
I want to discuss this while we have it at hand.
Yeah, spin around
So
7
lust
times.
was the one that ended up omitting.
They negated, but
Yeah.
it's in the Broadway.
It's in the
Although
Broadway.
it could be said, well, never mind.
I mean, you can have a lust
you've
for
seen
power.
the
Yeah, that's kind of what I was
Right,
thinking.
you can
like,
have a
but
lust for
if we're
power.
thinking like the traditional use of lust, then
Yeah.
yeah, I get it.
Actually, looking at these, we the only one we missed was greed. So there's lust, gluttony. We talked about gluttony.
Yeah.
He's seemingly well fed while everybody else is going
Yeah,
hungry.
and there's a drought and a famine.
There's
Yeah.
greed. Greed for power, but I mean that kind of like
Like-
overlies with the lust for power.
Yeah.
Sloth. Most of the time we see him, he's laying down,
He's
Yeah.
laying down.
lazing about. Wrath, we definitely see.
Be
Envy, we see,
prepared.
and pride, we see. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah,
Okay,
I
I'll
thought that
take
was
it.
interesting. So a little bit about this movie. Before we get into more
Well-
nuts and bolts here.
Whoa, whoa, whoa,
Oh,
Whoa,
whoa,
oh,
whoa,
Oh.
whoa, 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 whoa,
oh,
whoa.
oh.
well,
Rick, we have some questions for you.
sweet.
First of all, how dare you?
How dare I? Let's see. How do I answer that?
Okay, Jeff, you want to run those questions by Rick?
I am appalled. Yeah. No, thanks,
Question
Nelson.
number one.
Thank you,
How
Nelson.
dare you?
This is starting.
Question
off
number
great.
2: Who is Gamora?
dare you?
Anyways, all right. First one, Rick. These are questions we ask all of our guests, and this
Okay.
is just a way
Except for Ben,
except for Ben.
and he's still upset about that.
For real. Go back to the Die Hard episode. You'll
Yeah.
know that
Definition of terror thieves.
we came up with these after, and it was because of Ben. So
No,
Ben-
no, we came up with it
Oh,
beforehand.
did we?
Yep.
I,
Kids Psych 101 with Sarah. We asked her
That's
the questions.
right.
and-
I remember that one.
Yeah.
And I remember.
Yeah.
Sarah
Sarah was a coworker with Rick
Yeah.
for you for a while. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay. So, Rick, first question: what is your political bias? How would you describe yourself politically? There is no wrong answer.
Oh yeah.
But just if someone were to,
How would you best define
yeah,
yourself?
of where you
politically?
stand when it comes to government or official
Man.
stuff?
You know, actually, Jeff, you and I were actually talking about this
We should
earlier,
have been
and
recording.
I don't know how to put a label on it because I don't want to say I'm apolitical because
What about gay political?
I like thank you.
You're welcome.
It sounds more
AH
intelligent.
political.
Political.
See, you're catching on.
Short
What is
for
the-
optimistically political.
Yeah,
Ah.
that's it. I gotta be honest with you. Right now, I believe politics in general are good. Like I've got no problem with them. But if I'm honest with you, I'm really struggling with just the whole right now, like the two main parties that we have. Like I'm kind of struggling with what they've both become. Like they've both gone to like there is no middle ground anymore. It feels like they're both very polarized, and I would
Yeah.
say I lean more conservative than I do liberal. But
They're culturally polarized, but legislatively, like you could it's the Venn diagram's almost a circle.
yeah. So I think I don't know if I had to say anything. Like I would say politically, I'm just trying to figure it out right now because
Yeah.
I've seen so many things from both sides that,
Yeah.
if I can be honest with you, are just disgusting to me.
Yeah.
And what's frustrating, especially just as a pastor seeing this and just seeing just the way that we are allowing our politics to infiltrate the way we treat people and we justify it. It's getting kind of. I hate using the word disgusting because I'm not calling the people that, but just that behavior
Right.
is just
I'll
getting
call the
very.
people that.
Some of them have tendencies.
It's getting a little too polarizing for me, if I'm honest.
Now, question 1B.
Sweet.
I did not write this down.
What would you say the proper role for government would be?
Personal opinion, and I emphasize that.
So you're
I
saying this with
think-
the full authority of the
Yes.
Free Methodist Church?
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. I am completely representing. No. I would say personally, the goal of government, from where I stand, is keep us working and keep us safe. Outside of that, stay out of our business.
Okay.
So I think, like I said, I could probably go in much deeper than that, but like, I just feel like we'll just go with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Second question: how would you describe yourself or religiously? Politically religious. How would
Question
you?
2. What are
Um,
your political
faith,
biases?
Just within that context of,
Sure.
of your life.
So I know, as an American, I'm supposed to say, well, I'm a Christian. As yes, I am, but anymore, I try to just say I am a follower of Jesus because
Mhm.
unfortunately the term Christian has been used so much. So I am a Christian, as in I follow the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth, and I emphasize that, not Jesus of America.
That's Jesus.
That's Jesus. Yes, no.
White Jesus.
Yes, no. So yeah, I mean, I think when when it comes down to that, and just religiously, I consider myself a disciple of Jesus of Nazareth, the carpenter turned rabbi who is also Savior. So
We have a movie discussing his cup later on in the podcast series. So, sorry. Anyways, that was lame.
I didn't get
know.
the joke.
Oh, Indiana Jones.
Oh yeah.
Seriously? You got it right.
I
Oh, really?
so I was
Oh, guys.
nodding in agreement, but I was like,
Oh.
I had no idea.
It's an Indiana Jones reference.
I am ashamed.
The Goblet of
Of
Fire.
myself, not you.
Indiana Jones and the Goblet of Fire. Episode 4, A New
Yeah.
Hope.
J.K. Tolkien. Anyways,
I got that one.
any other stuff with religious? If there's anything you'd like to throw in there, just where have you always been? Has this always been your view? Have you been Christian
No,
raised?
so I actually became a Christian when I was 19,
Okay,
19 or 20.
and you're 74 years old now.
Yes. So 20 years old, I became a Christian. I was actually involved. You may know this. I'm not sure. I know you do, Jeff. Nelson, you may not, but was actually involved in a church that I later found out was teaching heretical doctrine, which kind of drove me to my fascination with theology.
State very clearly the name and address of the church, please.
I will not do that.
We'll cut this question entirely if you're not comfortable answering it, but would you mind saying what was the heretical position that they were teaching?
Oh, absolutely, because I think it needs to be heard. Just because a church teaches Jesus, you have to be very careful, because this particular group that I was a part of believed in Jesus, but they were known as the Jesus only. So the teaching that Jesus was the Father, Son, and now is the Holy Spirit. This is a teaching that said that you had to speak in tongues to be saved. You had to tithe to be saved. You had to address a certain way to be saved. So it was very legalistic, and the doctrines were just very salvation by works, even though they would tell you that it wasn't. Like, you weren't allowed to listen to anything outside of Southern Gospel.
What denomination or tradition is this under? Do you know?
It would be, I'm going to call it the Apostolic Pentecostal.
Okay.
But I emphasize apostolic, not just Pentecostal, because there's a lot of Pentecostals that aren't sound.
That way. Yeah.
They are. Yeah. So I don't want to confuse all Pentecostals with this particular group. So yeah, it was a branch of the Pentecostal tradition, if you will, and they kind of took it a step further, and basically were fighting for the monotheistic nature of God, and they thought that the teaching of the Trinity took away from all that. So essentially, the founder of that particular religion or sect or even cult,
Tradition.
I think, is true.
Yeah.
Basically tried to justify how the Bible teaches of just one God, which it does, but they deny the teaching of the Trinity.
God,
Which is
so it was, for them, it was monotheism without the Trinity.
absolutely
Okay.
yes.
That is fascinating. The third question is, how would you describe yourself in movies? What do you have a favorite movie, like an all-time favorite? Do you have a specific genre you just are in love with? How would you describe yourself when it comes to movies?
Man, I'm all over the place, if I'm honest.
That's great.
Hands down, the fact that you asked me to do this movie excites me, because this is top 3 favorite movies of all time.
Well, you know why we asked you if you did this one specifically, right?
Because I requested it.
Yes.
Yes.
But also because, you have and please don't take this the wrong way, but you know how children get really locked into a certain subject? Like, they'll be all about dinosaurs or trucks.
Mm-hmm.
You're still that with lions.
I am.
You've got that, like you got the lion tattoo.
Absolutely.
You've got lion art in your office. You're lion. You love lions.
I do. I'm crying on the inside, by the way.
He's a
But it's
Detroit.
fine. Yeah, good.
He's a Detroit fan. At
You
heart.
should be ashamed.
I should be, and yet.
Scratch that from the record.
No.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
You said this in your top 3 movies.
Yeah.
Could you give us the other 2? Well, how would you round out your top 3 if that's possible?
So I love Shawshank Redemption. That is
Number 1 on the IMDb 250.
It
has been
is
for a very long time.
also my
hands
favorite
down
movie.
one of my favorite movies, if not my favorite.
It's a fantastic.
It is a
movie.
fantastic. And my third favorite, man, I gotta be honest with you right now. And I know it's probably doesn't get really big reviews. I've stopped really caring about reviews, because
we don't care about reviews.
a lot of critics think that watching grass grow is some work of art. So
It is the
am-
way I do it.
Oh, okay. Watch how it just grows with such majesty.
I let my grass grow to piss off my neighbors, and that's art.
And that is art. Right now, I would say like I'm really digging Free Guy. I thought it was a hilarious, clever.
Ryan Reynolds, yeah.
Yeah, it really was. It was like the adult version of Wreck-It Ralph.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? And so I don't know. Like I love the Marvel. Like I love the superhero movies. I have no shame saying like I am a big Nicholas Sparks fan. Like those are kind of the movies that like my wife and I started going to on dates.
All right, what's your favorite Nicholas Sparks movie? Book turned to movie. What's your favorite one?
Oh, Safe Haven.
I have
hands
two.
down.
Does he have movies that weren't first books?
Yeah.
No.
He's got some. Wait,
No,
I'm sorry.
They've
I
always
misunderstood
been
your
books
question.
first. They've always been books
Okay.
first.
They've always, yeah.
And he has
sorry.
books that have not been turned into movies yet.
Yeah,
Correct.
yeah, yeah.
That's
My-
what I thought you asked.
Yeah, my wife's gone through most of his collection, I believe.
Yeah.
Safe Haven.
Safe Haven's pretty killer.
That's
man.
Julianne Hough, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
one's great.
It was a good
The
one.
second best one is with Zac Efron.
The
It's
lucky one, I
the
think.
lucky one. Yep, where he's
Yeah,
in
it's
the
pretty good.
military. Yeah,
It's pretty
those are
good.
my two favorite ones.
I don't think I've seen a Nicholas Sparks movie since high school. Is it Walk to Remember one of his?
It is.
That
I
was
was
the
literally about to
first-
say that.
So-
that was
yeah.
the first one. Put
Yeah.
in the movie.
One of my high school girlfriends, she wanted to watch that, and we went. I was over at her house, and I fell asleep almost immediately, and she let me sleep through the whole movie, and then she woke me up sometime after the movie because she had baked cookies,
Hey.
and then
Oh, so you weren't in the theater?
no.
Oh, okay.
We're at her house,
I was like, she's baking.
So I ate some
in the
cookies.
theater.
and then
That's
her
favorite.
parents were like, "Hey, I mean, like, it's getting late. You should probably get going." I'm like, "Yeah, I should." So that was that's what I remember of Nicholas Sparks. To Walk to Remember
I
is sleeping through it and eating some cookies after.
I have Nicholas Sparks to thank for introducing me to Switchfoot, the band.
Oh yeah. Okay.
They My Only Hope. They do like the most iconic
Yeah.
song in that she plays on the piano. Like I like some of his stuff. Now my wife and I had this. We're getting into a whole different movie series.
The Notebook is his, right?
The Notebook's his.
Wasn't a fan of
Nights
that
in
one.
Rodanthe. He's got one with Miley Cyrus.
Yeah.
I love the Carolina Coast. So like, it comes up a lot in conversations. I like the setting of his.
Redneck Riviera.
No.
Or was that further south? Is the Carolina Coast one of his movies?
No, but they all take place
They all
on
take
the
place in
Carolina
like
Coast.
beach,
Yeah, okay,
like
yeah,
beach
yeah.
cities type.
But Lindsay lost heart in it, and this is not a judgment towards him if we were ever to interact with him, because it happens. But
Nicholas Sparks, if you're listening and would like to come on the show,
we would love
we'd
that.
love to have you. I believe a couple of your books turned movies are in the IMDb Top 250.
Really?
I could be entirely wrong. I'll look that up while
We'll
you
make
talk.
a list of 250 movies and put them on there. But he has since been gotten divorced,
Yes.
and it's just
Yes.
hard to take a guy writing love stories seriously when his fell apart.
I will say
But
since
it's just a bummer.
since the divorce though, I will say that because I've read some of his books.
Okay,
like,
I've not
post-
read any.
I was
and
mistaken.
they've changed a little bit to where it's not just your. I mean, what's going to happen. It's pretty predictable.
He did do one on his brother. Like there is one that's not
Yeah.
romantic.
Yeah,
I know a lot more about Nicholas Sparks than I.
I'm
thought
realizing
about.
that as well, and I'm
Yeah.
thinking, wow. Yeah, and it's one of those things where like when you first watch it, you're like, "Yeah, I ain't gonna watch. And I just found myself, and I'm like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
This actually isn't that bad. So
No, I like the two you mentioned. I like
yeah,
the two-
yeah,
like those
we'll
two.
go with those two. We'll go. Those are
Awesome.
probably my two.
That's fun. Awesome. Well, we were glad you're here, and
I'm glad to be
we're
here.
talking about Lion King. Nelson's giving me the finger here.
A
Yes-
finger,
yes, sir.
not the finger.
Clarification.
Singular, non-specific.
That's the fun of not having cameras here. They can use their imagination.
Yes.
Well,
they
I just
can.
wanted to slow you down before you start getting into production notes because I have a clarification.
Yes.
Or
Yes, absolutely.
so our episode with the things we say, Nate and Sheldon.
Yes.
At one point, we were discussing
Return of the Jedi. Right?
feminism, and I don't remember why. But I had said that first and second wave feminism. I had spoken favorably of first and second wave feminism. I couldn't tell you from memory what I had said about them, just that I spoke favorably about them. And one of our listeners reached out to me and said that I should take a closer look, because basically my opinion on first and second wave is like, what you learn in high school class,
Mhm.
right? And as
Rosie the Riveter.
yeah, and that would fall under second wave. No, that would fall under first wave still, because the first wave of feminism was quite long. And a lot of my opinions are outside of the mainstream. A lot of my opinions are gleaned from dissenting opinion and revisionist history type stuff.
Mhm.
And feminism and the waves of feminism is not something that particularly interests me, so I've never really read about it. But the Sheologians, and they're linked below, have a really terrific podcast. Strongly recommend it. They specifically have a series of episodes called Feminism is Poison. They felt like they needed to, let's do a dedicated feminism series and talk about what feminism is, what it's done to our culture, etc. Listening to them discuss it, and they're looking at history, looking at who the main people in the main players were, what the results were. I think that I was wrong about first and second wave feminism being a necessary and good thing. And so that's linked below. The first episode in that series of Feminism is Poison, linked below in the show notes. I strongly recommend people check it out. You're going to hear stuff that if you've not already looked into the history of feminism, you're going to hear some really surprising things in there, and it's really well cited. Sheologians, if you're listening to this, we would love to have you on. Looking through the IMDb Top 250, there's a handful of movies that would be like feminist movies, but some of them it's more just like it's got a strong female character, like Alien.
Right.
I don't consider Alien a feminist movie, but if you look up lists of feminist movies, it's almost always number one on the list. But The Passion of Joan of Arc is on there, and I think
She was a female, yeah.
she was a woman, from what I remember. And so I think that would be a great episode to have the Sheologians on, both because it has religious contexts as well as a strong female political leader and all the trappings that come with that. If you're listening to this, Sheologians, we'd love to have you. We'll get in touch. And if you're not one of the Sheologians and you're listening to this and you have a way to contact them, please let them know that we'd be interested.
Yeah.
Share this episode with them.
And Nelson, thank you for making amends there. We have to let you go now.
Yeah.
But,
I was wrong about something, and now I must leave.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, but thank you. We appreciate your honesty. So we are actually hiring Rick if you need a.
Sweet.
Yeah. But no. Okay. No, thank you, Nelson. I appreciate that. And I think it's great. Like, we do want to be transparent on this podcast. Like, we want to, like, Nelson and I and our guests. We're not coming in presuming to be experts on everything. We're coming on here mostly because we've learned something watching a movie about ourselves, and we're discussing how that impacted us and how we think it affects other people. So we love what this has been doing the last 20 some episodes that we've been doing this podcast. So this has been great. And Nelson, I appreciate that. Awesome. Cool. All right. Lion King, 1994. This movie runs at about an hour and 27 minutes. Directed by Roger Allers and Rob Minkoff. It is rated G. I'll get into the cast here in a second. It is currently
rated G for good.
G for good.
Great.
For guidance.
It is 8.5 as of recording this episode. Is 8.5 out of 10 on the IMDb scale, and it is number 37 on the top 250 as of today. On the Rotten Tomato meter, it is 93%, and in the audience, it is also 93%. Before we get into the budget and we start talking about some of the nitty gritty here, I just want to go over some of the cast because this cast is stacked.
It's a loaded cast. It really is.
1994, we got Rowan Atkinson, Mr. Bean as Zazu, Matthew Broderick, Ferris Bueller as Simba. Some of these actresses I don't recognize, but I think she did a great job. Young Nala was by Nikita Calamé Harris.
Young Nala?
Nala.
I know. I saw that in the credits as well, and it's like as herself, and it's like, wow, who is this woman?
Jim Cummings, who is?
Yeah, Jim Cummings is Winnie the Pooh.
Winnie the Pooh,
and he does the singing parts for Scar.
But he's also Ed the hyena.
Also Ed the hyena.
Whoopi Goldberg.
He's an all-star voice actor.
Yeah, Whoopi Goldberg is one of the hyenas.
Shenzi, right?
Shenzi, yep. Yeah. The lead hyena, you can say.
Do you know where Whoopi gets her nickname? Whoopi?
I believe it's a little Debbie treat. Whoopi.
It came from when she was on the set of Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Okay, yeah.
She is a very farty woman.
Really?
And the director was calling her Whoopi, like Whoopi Cushion, so she took it on as a nickname. Her last name's not actually Goldberg. She took that on because she thinks it's funny to have a Jewish name for a black woman. I agree. That is funny. And actually, apparently the fartiness hasn't stopped. I saw a headline recently that one of her castmates on The View was complaining about how farty she is on set. So I disagree with Whoopi Goldberg on a lot of things, but I think you keep gassing out your co-stars. That's hilarious.
way to make an impression.
That's actually that's a
Everlasting.
great fact. Jeremy Irons, Scar. Just a couple more here to mention because we got James Earl Jones. The guy from from Sandlot. Who's Mufasa?
No, he's Darth Vader.
I was gonna say he's Darth
James
Vader.
Earl Jones is Darth Vader.
What? Anakin Skywalker's Darth Vader. Guys, come on. Nathan Lane's Timon. And then here's the other fun fact that so you got Jonathan Taylor Thomas as young Simba
So
from
cute.
Home Improvement.
Yeah.
And
Teenage Heartthrob.
Jonathan
Taylor
Tim
Thomas.
Allen was Buzz Lightyear. So there's a scene in Home Improvement where it's a Halloween episode, and two trick-or-treaters come to the door. One's Buzz Lightyear, one's dressed up as Simba, and Jonathan Taylor Thomas's character gives like a handful of candy to the Simba character and one piece to the Buzz Lightyear character.
Sidebar: that's like one of my favorite like sitcoms of all
Home
time.
Improvement.
Oh my
it's
goodness!
classic.
Oh my gosh!
It stands the test of time.
Anyway, yeah,
It's great.
Yeah.
No, and Jonathan Taylor Thomas, he's in a bunch of other good movies that I enjoy
Man, the House
from
is
this
funny.
from this generation. Yeah, Chevy Chase, man.
You
Yeah.
know, just now trying to do the Tim Allen laugh, I realized that he's basically going ho ho ho.
Yeah.
No wonder he's the Santa
he
Claus.
was meant for that role.
He was meant. Yeah, he was meant to play Santa.
The other the trio of hyenas. One
Yeah.
of them is done by Cheech Moran.
That's right.
Yes.
They originally wanted to get Cheech and Chong to
yeah.
do both of them.
Yep.
Chong was not interested.
Well, here's
I believe he was filming something else at the time, and he couldn't.
But
he
also,
couldn't- he
Cheech
couldn't
and
work it.
Chong, after the film series happened, Cheech
Which
and
was
Chong,
way before
they
this
kinda-
movie.
they got separated.
Yeah, they kind of.
I didn't know they were together.
And so
Yeah.
when Tommy Chong was doing that 70s show, he plays Al. I remember watching a video
Remember that?
sometime after that wrapped up where he basically did like the social media post where he's like, "Hey, I'm Tommy Chong. I'm looking for Cheech. I haven't seen him in years. I want to get in touch."
Oh wow!
That's
And
cool.
they got reunited from fans, like,
Yeah.
and so they're
They're back together.
Sorry.
no. Actually, hold on, pause. I need you to do it again
What?
with more passion.
They're back together now, though. They
Yeah.
were in
Kids
Muppets
moment.
Mayhem.
Yes, they were.
They were together in
And
the
so
Disney
I'm-
Plus Muppets.
I'm
Mayhem.
glad Cheech and Chong have made amends. I don't know why they got separated, but I'm glad that they're
You know
they're
what?
friends
We don't
again.
care. They're
Yeah.
friends again.
Yeah.
So that's all the stats I've got. Just going into the movie, but the cast is like this is a great movie. Oh, and Hans Zimmer did the soundtrack with
Elton John.
Elton John. There he is. Couldn't think of his
Okay.
name. Recently retired from music, Elton John. So yeah,
Of
it's a fantastic movie. Like
It
just
really is.
combination of artists, writers. This is beautiful.
of gay piano rock stars from England, Elton John's got to be my favorite.
Freddie Prinze played piano too.
Wait, Freddie Prinze, isn't
Queen.
not piano?
What he played piano?
Freddie
no?
Mercury?
Freddie Mercury. There it is.
Yeah, Freddie Prinze
Freddie
is Scooby
Prinze
Doo.
Jr. Freddie Prinze Jr.
Freddie Prinze
I
Jr.
was kind of, I
was
was like,
the frontman of Queen.
Yeah.
Freddie Mercury.
When you
From
said that, I was
Queen.
like, is Freddie Prinze gay?
I couldn't think of his name. All right. We've made it. We've made it to the nuts and bolts here.
Yeah.
Lion King.
But I want to say, like, because you mentioned Hans Zimmer's music.
yes.
Zimmer's music.
Sorry.
Start of COVID, I decided I'm going to learn an instrument. And I started playing bass guitar. And I play pretty regularly. And I play well enough that I could gig at bars. Now when I listen to music, I tend to hear the bass lines better than I did before just
Sure.
because it's in my mind. And the bass lines in the music here are so good. So fun. So there's this band called Punk Rock Factory. They take, oftentimes they're going to be taking songs that are family friendly. Oftentimes it's like theme songs, Disney songs, that kind of thing. And they do punk rock covers of them. And they did a cover of a couple different songs from Lion King. So after listening to Just Can't Wait to Be King, I was like, man, that is, like, the bass lines in this are so fun. So I jumped over there to see, like, how it is. I don't have many gripes with this band, but that was a gripe of mine that, like, the bass line in this is super good, and you just turned it into, like, a basic punk line. And I get it. That's what you do. You're punk music. But you can still, like, Red Hot Chili Peppers mix
Not
funk
familiar
and
with
punk. Yeah, so I was a little disappointed. They're linked below, specifically the two songs that they covered from Lion King. Check them out. Whole lot of fun. My kids, I played it when we're in the car because Jem wants to play Disney songs and I want to play punk music because that's what I listen to. And a lot of punk music has no words for kids. So the compromise is we play Punk Rock Factory and we play Disney.
fair.
We play their two Disney albums. And my kids originally hated it. And I just played it anyway. But now it's at the point, like, they're singing along. Floyd's in the back seat, like, so it's great. Love it.
That's great.
That's cool.
I'm assuming, but I'm going to ask just because kind of get a starting point here, getting into the bones of this movie here. You guys have.
Aren't you curious about the budget, Jeff?
No, let me. Well, yeah, no. You don't happen to have the budget by chance, do you?
Oh, by golly, I do.
Look at that. Look at
couldn't
that.
have
What a
planned it
guy.
that
So
way.
in 1994, $45 million for this project.
Wow.
That's not crazy.
It was for its time. They had real lions in studio for the animators to like
in studio.
Yeah.
Oh,
tame ones, tamed lions.
Oh yeah, all
brought-
the tame lions.
They brought them in studio so that the animators could get like a real feel for what a lion looks like. And I gotta say, like the way, like especially in the Buffalo Stampede, leading up to right after that,
It was wildebeest.
when
Not that it matters.
wildebeest. Thank
Just
you.
get it
No,
right.
it does matter. It does
It
matter.
actually does matter.
When Simba's looking for Mufasa, the way his ears move convey a lot of emotion. The animators really knocked it out of the park here.
Yeah, they did.
But yeah, so it is like $45 million was a lot of money.
What's that translate to today?
$92 million.
Now that doesn't sound like a lot.
Well, and you gotta think, though,
But
that's
when you compare that to modern projects,
Right.
that actually is pretty low.
that is low.
Yeah.
But at the time, that was a lot for a movie. And we've talked about this before. There's other movies we've talked about where the budget was quite high, but even with inflation, is a lot lower than movies are made for today. This movie, when it debuted on the IMDb Top 250 in 1996, debuted at 126. It fell off the Top 250 in 1998, and then returned in 2007. The highest rank it's ever been at was 33. What was it at? What's it at today?
I think you said 32.
37.
Oh, 37.
37?
I stand corrected.
Yeah, so it's fallen just
8.5.
a little bit, but yeah, so it fell off for about a decade. Don't know why, but it did.
Interesting.
You have my permission now to get into other questions.
No, that's good. I'm assuming that because with the age and the iconicness of this movie, you guys have seen this before coming into this podcast. This episode.
I'd heard about it.
Okay.
I've seen it
Yeah,
a bunch of
same.
times.
Is this one that you guys enjoy? Like, is this one that, like, for you, we're all close to the same age. So,
Pretty
like,
close.
like I was 5 years old in '94. So, like, this movie was like I was prime for like a lion fight movie when I was 5 or 6 years old. So this movie was great then, and it still rocks today.
It is, for me, it is definitely one of those like pillars of my childhood. I still remember seeing the trailer. Which, fun fact about the trailer, but the trailer was actually the opening scene of the Lion King.
Yep.
So that's pretty
Just Circle
killer.
of Life.
First time Disney ever did that. They used the opening scene of the movie as the trailer, and I thought the trailer was terrible as a kid. I'm like, well, this is boring. This looks like National Geographic or something. And then we went and saw it, and all I could think about was Rafiki kicking the crap out of some hyenas. So to this day, it is still hands down like it is my childhood in a nutshell. I love it.
For me, I'm sure I watched this a bunch as a kid, and my mom will probably clarify which movies I watched a lot of and which ones I didn't so much. My parents had a pretty extensive Disney VHS collection. So I probably got a fair bit of this. But honestly, like it's like I like this movie. But if I never saw it again, I'd be fine. I know for a lot of people our age, this is a movie it's like I can't wait till my kid is old enough to understand movies so that I can share this with them. And for me, it's like, it's a kid's movie that I'm comfortable showing for my kids, and that's good enough.
Yeah, I mean, same. I mean,
I don't dislike it.
It's fun to watch, and like whenever it comes on, it's just like instantly like the reason we don't watch it now. Well, number one, kind of getting up there, it's kind of weird watching it almost 40, but it drives my wife crazy that it's like a natural reaction. I just start quoting the movie. And I can't tell you how many times she's been like, listen, if you quote one more line, we're done. And I'm like, okay. And then it just happens. It just naturally,
That's fun.
It just naturally happens. Yeah.
At least
that is a tough line. The moment like you start to ruin the movie for other people because now you're actively interacting with it.
Right.
I've got multiple movies that people know not to watch with me because I'll just, alrighty then, just start quoting it from front to back. So
Gran Torino, right?
I get that. Yeah.
There's
wanna get
at
nuts?
least two people that I know, both of whom are in our audience, who dislike Lion King.
Really?
And that's something that I really don't get.
Hurts my
I
soul a little bit.
understand loving it, and I understand being about it. It's weird to me that there are people that like actively dislike it.
No.
And you know who you are.
It isn't. It is an emotionally heavy movie, like especially to be catered to young
That's
kids.
fair.
Like to see murder, fatherlessness, like abandonment, like just like there's some heavy topics in this movie. I know we'll get into this episode, but it's a heavy movie. Whereas like something like Aladdin is a genie, a talking, just like the perils. The perils don't seem to be as heavy as something like this, where he watched his father die, and now he has to go away from his mom and never see her again, and he loses everything he knows, and now
and he's carrying guilt that's not his.
Yeah,
it's
a heavy movie.
Yeah, that's a good point.
To play devil's advocate for the two people that dislike it, and yes, they are the devil. Neither of them. It's because it's too heavy.
Oh.
I know for certain one of them watches tons of heavy movies, so it's definitely not that. And the other one, it's because really what it boils down to is that person just doesn't like musicals.
That's fair. That's fair.
I mean,
and this is a musical. This is very much a musical.
No, absolutely. Yeah, no, I get that. Well, that was a good episode, boys. No, so Lion King. So I don't know, where should we start here? So I'm going to throw out a quote, and then we'll go from there, and we'll kind of go around the room here.
I love it.
This is after Simba and Nala run off to find the elephant graveyard very early on in the movie. After Scar's trying to sabotage. And so Mufasa and young Simba are talking. So Mufasa says, "Simba, I'm very disappointed in you." Young Simba says, "I know." Jump forward a little bit. Young Simba goes, "I was just trying to be brave like you." Mufasa says, "I'm only brave when I have to be, Simba. Being brave doesn't mean you go looking for trouble." Young Simba says, "But you're not scared of anything." Mufasa goes, "I was today." It's, I've seen this movie many times, but this is the first time where I'm intently listening to the dialogue, watching for interactions between characters and stuff, and first time watching it as a father. So I'm watching it with new set of eyes and stuff. And so there's just things I'm picking up. And, there is, as a young, we've all been young boys, we've had this mentality of we need to be brave 24/7. And this isn't a super heavy theme that I picked up on, but I do think it's prevalent. I think it's something that's still current today. So there is this idea of young boys have to be just over the top, adventurous and stuff. I think there can be an incorrect way of showing bravery to kids. And I think this movie redeems some of that as I'm only brave. Being brave doesn't mean you have to go looking for trouble. And that stood out to me. And I'd never noticed that interaction before watching this movie. And I think that's a very, I agree with him. So this specific truth that's being I agree with what's being stated here.
And Simba's act of bravery was going beyond their territory in search of trouble. Yeah. John Quincy Adams famously said, "America goes not abroad in search of monsters to destroy. We are at our best when we are focused within our territory." Slightly less eloquent, as my father likes to say, there's a fine line between bravery and stupidity.
I love that.
and it's true. What Simba did was not even walking that line. It ran right past that line. It was stupid. It was foolish what he was doing.
I mean, he's also a kid, though.
And he'd been tricked by his mischievous uncle.
Gave him some false confidence.
And I want to get into what Scar did there, but Rick, first, what are your thoughts on that line? Does it resonate with you, or do you think it's missing something?
No, I think what's really cool is I love that line where it says, I just want to be brave like you, and then Mufasa says that basically I'm only brave when I need to be. Being brave doesn't we've already covered that. But then I love when he says but Dad, you're not afraid of anything. When he says I was today, that just hits me.
Yeah.
There's a respect because Simba, he's just a young kid. He's trying on his dad's shoes. And he's realizing that he can't run as
In fact,
fast.
actually, in that scene, he steps
does
in his dad's
that. Yeah, that's a good
And
point.
this is after him talking to Scar about, "I'm going to be your king someday."
Yeah.
So Simba's already got that mentality of I got to be king. I got to be brave 24/7.
Yeah. And I think just that interaction, because then it goes from you know, I got to teach my son a lesson. So like, oh, it's about to go down. And then like they have that father-son moment. And then he's like, because nobody messes with your dad. And they like tackle. And it was just such a cool father-son interaction. And just like, it resonates with me just because, you know, my dad is like Superman. You know what I mean? Like, and he's always been that way. Even now, you know, when you get older, the S on the chest shrinks a little bit and you realize that they're just human. But in my mind, especially as a kid, my dad could do anything. And I think that what we see there is just that respect, as misguided as it may be. There's this real big respect that Simba has for his dad, which I think is pretty killer.
Yeah. No, that's pretty much all I had on that. That was just the first thing that jumped out to me, dialogue-wise, where I'm like, okay, that's a very profound statement. So
yeah.
Do either of you have something you'd like to move on for?
Well, before we move on, I kind of want to take a step back into what Scar did to trick the way Scar tricked Simba.
Yeah.
Into going into the elephant graveyard in the first place. And we talked about this a bit with the things we say when we were talking about, not even talking about Return of the Jedi. We were talking about the prequel trilogy and how then Emperor Palpatine, future Darth Sidious, said, of course, this is a thing that the Jedi wouldn't tell you about, right? To lure him into the dark side. Actually, I guess that was with Stephen Kent. So Scar does the classic bad guy. And this goes back to Garden of Eden stuff. He says, he didn't show you what's beyond that rise at the northern border. Of course the Jedi wouldn't tell you about this. He didn't show you what's beyond the garden. And Rick, you're our resident pastor. Tell us, what's the allegory there with the Garden of Eden?
Oh, so the first thing that came to mind was, did God really say? Right? And it's
did God really say?
Yeah, where essentially, you know, the serpent is speaking to Adam and Eve and basically saying that, you know, God's holding out on you.
Yeah.
You know, he's keeping something from you, you know, and there's a lot of parallels here. So that's a good illustration.
There's this podcast, link below, The World's Greatest Con. And it's written by a guy that is a stage magician, but he also does like close-up magic and con stuff. And one of the things that he repeatedly insists is this kind of like mantra in the con man world, which is you can't con an honest John.
Okay.
And basically, the to flesh that out a bit more, if you con an honest guy, what you're actually doing is just defrauding him. A good con is where you trick somebody into breaking the law themselves so that they can't actually report on you. Okay. So the example he gives is a situation where a windowless van rolls up, a guy in a jumpsuit comes out and says, hey, I've got these speakers. They were supposed to go to a club. We ordered too many, and I got to return them. And do you want them? I'll sell them to you at below market price, blah, 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 blah. And he bought them, and he got scammed. But the thing is, he thought he was buying stolen merchandise. So he's sacrificing his morals. Okay? And we've got Scar doing the same with Simba. You know, if you go out there, you know that your dad doesn't want you out there. But this is what's out there. Isn't that tempting? Isn't that juicy? And Adam and Eve, same situation.
Yeah.
Like he gave them, hey, here's a way you can rebel, and wouldn't it be nice? So, like a good con is one where you trick somebody into doing, not even trick something, you tempt somebody with doing something that they know is wrong. And I just thought that was really interesting. Let them pull the trigger. And let them pull the trigger. And let them dig their own grave. Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, their hands are technically clean.
True. And on that, I mean, even when you think about, going back to like the Garden of Eden, like we talk about Satan, he's the deceiver. And what's interesting about deception is not a full out lie. It's a perverted truth. Like there's things in there. That's why it's so easy to bite onto. And I think that, I mean, again, that goes along with what you're saying with what Scar did with Simba. Like he's saying, hey, this isn't right. But then again, like there's a lot out there that you don't know. So maybe go check it out, So, yeah. Scar's a good villain.
Scar's an excellent villain.
An excellent villain.
And originally, it wasn't. He wasn't going to be the brother of Mufasa.
Really? I read that.
He was going to be the lead of another pack.
Just like a random line.
And that in the sequel, that's kind of how it works out.
I never saw the sequel.
I've seen
it's Romeo and Juliet. This one's Hamlet.
Yeah,
sequel is Romeo and Juliet.
Okay. I've seen Lion King 1.5, and I've also started watching The Lion Guard, which is on Disney Plus.
Yeah,
the animated series, which actually had some they talk about within at least the first 2 episodes. They talk about the stuff in this movie.
Yeah.
Because I don't know where it falls in the line of like with Lion King 2, but like it is.
That was a direct-to-video release. So
right. It is a Simba. Simba's the
Simba's
dad in
son.
the character, and it's
Gotcha.
about Simba's son. So it's not too far off in the future.
yeah,
but
Lion King 2 is Simba's daughter falls in love with the heir to be of Scar's descendant tribe, which live in the Outer Lands. So it's
okay.
Romeo and Juliet.
Wow.
Essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fun fact: Lion King was actually originally going to be called the King of the Jungle,
King of the Jungle.
and then they realized this isn't going
Who
to work
is the
because
King of the Jungle?
yeah.
Yeah.
So I was reading that today, and I was like, "That's interesting," because there's not a single outside of when he's with Timon and Pumbaa.
Yeah.
There's really no jungle.
Right.
And that's not even really a
And lions don't
Jungle, I
live in
guess.
jungles. Tigers do.
exactly. Which again, another fun fact: the sound that Simba makes when he roars is actually not a lion roar; it is a tiger roar.
Well,
They use that sound effect.
I have a disagreeing fact. I heard that all the lion. I read that all the
Gasp.
lion roars were specifically intentionally human roars, so they all were different.
Interesting.
Like I
Google
I
has
can't-
betrayed me.
verify it, but I'd heard that like they wanted intentionally to each lion in this movie to have a different roar, so they actually manipulated human sounds.
Yeah.
But yeah, but I'm
Interesting.
curious which one's true because both are very fascinating.
Yeah,
That's pretty neat.
that's pretty dandy.
How neat is that?
Backing up before Scar's conversation with
You're
Simba,
going back even further.
a little bit further. Well,
Take it back.
you jumped in like a quarter of the way through the film.
That's also true.
That's how I do.
So Simba says to Mufasa, "I thought a king could do whatever he wants." Simba responds, "There's more to being king than getting your way all the time."
Ooh.
Thoughts?
If I was under a not, like, obviously I believe Jesus is king, but like if we're talking here on planet
Amen.
Earth,
Amen.
if I was under a king, I would be very happy if that was the king's mentality.
Absolutely.
But I've read a lot of history books about kings that did not have that mentality. So
Like Saul, the first king in Israel.
yeah. So
They got it wrong
off to a great
right
start.
away.
yeah, I mean, I don't have much to add with that except for the fact that like Mufasa, from what we know of him, the dude's legit.
He was legit.
And I would vote for him for president.
I
Like,
do think
yes.
that what his response is gives away a little bit, though. There's more to being king than getting your way all the time. What that sentence means is, yes, the king does get his way all the time, but there's more to it. It betrays kind of like this underlying, the king is basically there's nobody above the king to instruct them on how to rule.
right, but then he wouldn't be king if there was someone above him. So.
Yeah. Well, so in 1 Samuel 8:10 through 22, God gives Samuel instructions on how a king should rule. Because the Israelites are insistent that they have a king, even though God has already instructed them through Samuel all of the issues that they'll have if they have a king.
Right.
And they say, we want one anyway.
Yep.
And so there's a handful of things that a king must do to be a good king. They must maintain justice, they must defend the people, and they must respect and follow God's laws. Given these instructions, Mufasa is, by biblical standards, a good king.
Yeah, they don't really talk about tax as much in this
By
movie.
Jewish standards.
Scar does.
I'm
This
getting
shows
into
you-
that.
Yeah, tomato.
Well,
yeah. I get what you're, by standards established for Israel in the antiquities.
yes.
This is what would make for a
Yes.
good king. I think those same standards, if applied to government officials today, would also make for good government officials.
Agreed.
And then he says, everything you see exists together in a delicate balance. As king, you need to understand that balance and respect all the creatures, from the crawling ant to the leaping antelope. But Dad, don't we eat the antelope?
Yes, son, but let me explain.
Yes, Simba.
Simba.
But let
It's
me
been a minute.
explain, yeah. When we die, our bodies become the grass, and the antelope eat the grass, and so we are all connected in the great circle of life.
Oh, like the song.
Like the
Yeah.
song. Yeah.
It's a circle
that cool?
of life.
I get it now.
I'd buy
I
that.
get it.
I was hoping one of you would join in on that.
Mm.
Copyrights. man.
There's two things from that, like within this universe, right? All animals are intelligent creatures with motives of their own. Blah 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 blah.
Except the one hyena.
Yeah, except for Ed. No, but what I mean by that is like, if I kept people as farm animals
Easy.
and ate them,
Easy.
okay, that's similar to Mufasa's land, where he eats the antelope that graze on his land. Because what we see in the series is in the movie is every single animal is an intelligent creature in the sense that like it thinks, it feels, it has dreams and motivations and blah 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 blah. So we get into some weird rights things.
Yeah.
But I would say, without getting too like squirrely about it, it is really, there's a documentary called Biggest Little Farm, linked below. They wanted to do this organic farm type thing, and they had an issue with coyotes, and he shot a coyote,
Unbelievable.
and he felt really bad about that, and he's like, I don't want to kill anymore to protect our chickens and our ducks and stuff. So what am I going to do? We've got issues with groundhogs. That's what's bringing in the coyotes. We've got chickens and dogs, and that's what's bringing in coyotes. We've got all
Groundhogs are
kinds of
evil, by
snail
the way.
issues. And so we've got snails that are killing off our citrus. We've got birds that are killing off our fruit. How do we cope? Spoiler for the documentary, but they do it beautifully, so watch it anyway.
That wasn't
you know,
really a spoiler.
ducks, well, no, the solution.
Oh.
Ducks he brings into the orchard, and the ducks eat the snails. He builds a bunch of owl boxes around the property because the owls eat the gophers and the groundhogs and the birds that are eating his produce.
So he doesn't kill them, but he brings someone else to bring in and kill them.
More that he fleshes out the ecosystem so that there's this circle of life.
Oh, like the movie.
A delicate balance.
Because if the owls are eating the groundhogs, then there's nothing to attract the coyotes, which are the big threat to everything.
Right. And then, of course, like he talks about how now he also has snakes on his property, but these are snakes that eat gophers, and they're not a threat to him, but they keep the gopher population down. But then he also talks about the benefit that gophers being on his property bring. They do all kinds of tunneling so that when it rains, the rain gets
like
deep into the roots.
irrigation.
Like all of it has a benefit. And to jump way later in the film, when Nala meets up with Simba, one of the things she says is there's no food and there's no water. Now, it's hard to imagine how a lion could be responsible for the lack of water. Also linked below...
Heavy taxation.
Heavy taxation. Also linked below is a documentary about how wolves change rivers. So they killed off all the wolves in Yellowstone National Park.
Like they actively do?
Yeah.
That's a thing that they're
in the
actively
past.
doing.
They eradicated the predators so that it would be safe for pedestrians to walk around and examine. And they were running into all kinds of issues. And they reintroduced wolves into Yellowstone. And one of the and they talk about the what's called an ecological cascade, how the apex predator affects all the way down to the insect level. One of the crazy things about introducing wolves is that the rivers are now better. The short answer is the deer aren't grazing by the river anymore because that's too out in the open. And as a result, the grass is growing thicker there, and so the shores are stronger, and so the river gets narrower and runs faster instead of spreading out flat because all the grass is short and dead. It's really interesting when they say that line about like the river, there's no water and there's no food. There actually is a correlation there, a scientific like that
Do
we've
you think
observed.
that was like
Intentional?
Yeah, or do
I
you
don't
think
know.
that's just like lucky that science can now
Back up the claim?
prove up?
I think it's more the latter. Yeah.
Because that is fascinating. Like that, I appreciate that type of stuff too. Like I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not like, I mean, we've talked about this before. I think in Into the Wild or another movie we talked about how like I'm not super into the conspiracies of like global warming and stuff, but like I do want to leave this place better than I entered it. You know, like I'm definitely about going green in the sense of just being ecologically respectful to Earth. But like,
I
it's
mean,
like I'm very much interested in this documentary.
It's one of
There
the
was-
first instructions that God gave man.
Well, there was time
Tend
when,
the garden, keep it.
there was a time when combustion, that we now take for granted with maps. There was a time when that was revolutionary, and we
100%.
look at the types of energy now that we're bucking against, and it's like if they're there, God gave us the intelligence and He gave us the resource for alternate fuels. We would be silly not to use them. And so, like, I'm just saying, like, yeah, I think that we can get so caught on something that we overlook.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I'm all for alternative fuel sources. Where it gets squirrely is that, so for example, hilarious example, California signed into law that by 2050 it'll be illegal to sell a gas vehicle in
Oh, boy.
California. And within a month of them signing that into law, they had rolling blackouts because of heat wave. And Gavin Newsom, governor of California, had to say, "Hey, if you've got an electric vehicle, please don't charge it because it's a lot of energy." And as Thomas Massey has pointed out, a single electric vehicle to charge is equivalent to 12 refrigerators. Right? So think about your peak heat flash, right? And everybody's struggling, like they don't have enough energy for the grid for everybody's air conditioners. Now add on to that every home's got 12 fridges in it. Right? So like it's not that I oppose alternate fuel sources. It's that when government says, "Hey, we're going to do this,"
Agree.
they almost always get it wrong. And we
Or
have to let the
it's-
market figure out how it's going to accommodate
Right.
this.
I mean, like, or they inevitably bottleneck some sort of
Yeah.
aspect
They-
of
yeah.
it. and
Yeah.
Yeah.
They choke themselves out.
Yeah.
So Lion King is a going green propaganda, and we should boycott this movie.
Basically.
Got it.
That's the
Basically.
sum of what I'm saying.
Yes.
All right, Rick.
Yes.
So
I knew it.
what's some was that it for that
For that
Nelson?
tirade?
Yeah.
Yes.
Love it. What's
Tirade
some,
over.
What's some of the stuff that's jumped out at you in this movie?
I mean, it's another quote, and it's further into the movie, but I kind of feel like we're jumping around anyway.
It's
So
all right.
it's not really necessarily chronological. But
Everyone knows how this ends.
I loved Rafiki, man. Like Rafiki was just one of my favorite characters of all time in general. Disney speaking, right? Because the big thing about The Lion King that I always love too is Simba dealing with his past and realizing that number one, he wasn't to blame for it, but even if he was to blame for it, that your past doesn't define you. And I love what Rafiki said here, where he says it's a part where he basically reunites with him, and he's got this thing where like he's just talking out of nowhere. Rafiki just hits him over the head with a stick. He's like, why'd you do that? And Rafiki's like, it doesn't matter. It's in the past. He's like, yes, but it still hurt. He said, yes, the past can hurt. But what I've learned is, he says, but from the way I see it, you can either run from it or learn from it. Right?
Yeah.
And
And then what do they do right after that? What does Rafiki
my
do right after
gosh.
that? He swings
he
his stick,
swings again.
and
He's
then
like,
Simba ducks.
and he ducks.
So he
Yeah.
learns from it.
He
Yes.
learns from the past.
Yeah.
he does learn. And
It's a beautiful moment. I had that one down as two. Yeah.
And so for me, like one of the big things about Lion King is just Simba going through this. He went from being, I mean, let's be honest, he went from being a very privileged youth,
Yeah.
able to do it, brat. He was just, he was just a privileged,
Yeah.
spoiled
Entitled. Yeah.
brat. Gets himself into some trouble. And a lot of it is well intended. Like he wasn't trying to be mischievous, but it just happened, in youth. And then
He wasn't a bully. He was just.
he wasn't.
arrogant.
He was just a
yeah,
kid,
entitled,
and then he experiences trauma. Like literally watches his uncle murder.
He doesn't see Scar there.
Oh, that's right. That's
Yeah,
right.
He just
That's
sees
right.
his dad fall from the cliff.
Which,
Yeah.
by the way, it is morbid as all get out. But one of the best lines that Scar says in that is the whole "Long live the king." Like
Yeah.
it's just his eeriest thing
It's
that I
awesome.
should have not seen as a kid.
Yeah.
And then
He's
you just
one of
see
my
him
favorite
fall into his
villains.
death, and I'm like,
He's actually more gruesome, and I'll share this later after you finish your.
But no,
thought.
and so just seeing that progression that, then he goes into this state where he like basically is trying to be something that he's not.
Yeah.
And then he gets reunited with the people that know him best, and they're basically
Yeah.
talking. It's just such a cool progression that we see with Simba, man. That
Yeah.
and he goes and takes his place. It's so cool. It's so cool.
Yeah.
Rafiki is voiced by an actor named Benson Dubois. And it's
Dubois.
Dubois. He's from St. Louis. St.
Nah, that
Louis.
doesn't sound right.
That doesn't.
St.
doesn't-
Louis. Sorry, I said Benson Dubois. That's not correct. Is Robert
Robert
Guillaume.
Guillaume.
Yeah.
He's famous for playing a character named Benson Dubois.
Oh, there you go.
So he started on a show called Soap, which was from
Soap.
1977 to 1980.
Sounds clean.
That was the name of his character on there. It got a spin-off series. So he did 50 episodes as Benson Dubois on Soap. Then he got a spin-off series called Benson that he did for 160 episodes. I imagine if you're a young black man in the 90s, for you, Rafiki being voiced by Robert Guillaume, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
This is the only thing I know him from is playing Rafiki, and I'm curious to know to see more of his stuff. But yeah.
I'm looking through his stats right now, and this is super random. But like, I played the game Half-Life back in the day, and he voices a character in Half-Life. So
Yep.
I can't picture that character right now. But so yeah, I'm not familiar with him either. Outside that,
And almost every single time Rafiki was in something, so Lion King 2, Lion King 1.5, Timon and Pumbaa show, he voiced Rafiki still.
that's
Cool.
fun.
That's fun.
That's fun. So let's. I want, if you guys don't mind, I want to stay on this moment for a second, or
Yeah,
just this idea of
please.
of what happens here. Like Simba, we see this. We don't know Simba's age, and obviously the age of lions is different in perspective of us human beings and stuff. But like, we see a kid go through a very traumatic event. He witnesses his dad dying.
Yeah, right.
Later finds out it's murder, but he witnesses dad's dying, and he is told by Scar right after finding the body that it's because you caused the stampede. You killed your father. Run.
Yeah.
We're seeing depicted childhood trauma,
Mm-hmm.
and now a child that's left to deal with this on his own. Abandonment, just secluded, and unhomed. Like so, he's now exiled essentially from his home and stuff.
Yeah.
As a kid watching that, you don't really pick up on the, oh, that's deep. You know, you're just like, oh, that was scary. What's gonna happen? Oh, the Timon and Pumbaa.
Right.
It gets lighthearted very quickly because Timon and Pumbaa enter in.
Right.
You've got the comic relief coming in, but like, how do you think this movie handles Simba's journey of trauma? So like, do you think that Simba has an accurate working through? Obviously, like it wouldn't end at the end of this movie, but do you think that they acknowledge it enough, or do you think Simba doesn't portray that well to have gone through what he goes through, or like? So just I don't know. What's your take on adult Simba when it comes to what he went through as a kid?
I do want to back up too, because I think there's something that's important to see, which is another heavy topic that you don't pick up on as a kid, and I actually didn't even think about till you said something. Is we need to tie into the there's an aspect of abuse that happens with Scar. Like and when you've got family essentially putting you on a guilt trip, like man, that messes with you.
Yeah.
And Scar doesn't say you killed your father. He says you're responsible for your father's death.
Yeah.
If you hadn't been there, he wouldn't have died.
He wouldn't have died.
And so it's again like that. A really good bad guy, he's not lying. He's deceiving.
Yeah. He's manipulating.
Yeah. So to answer your question too, at least from where I sit, like, I mean, obviously it's a they can't show all of it, but I think it's a very accurate portrayal of how we deal with trauma, because I mean, what happens? Like essentially, teenage Simba, it feels like he doesn't have a home. So what does he do? It's not that he acts out, but he just kind of goes somewhere where he's not, that's not common to him.
Yeah.
He meets a couple of people who essentially, which by the way, this is a controversial statement I'm about to make, but I stand by it. One of the worst songs ever that Disney made is Hakuna Matata. There, I said it, and I don't offer an apology.
But it means no worries.
I hate it
for the rest of your days.
I know, and
it's a problem-free philosophy.
So I have probably just upset half of your fan base, guys.
My favorite,
just your fan base, Rick.
Just my fan base. That was very small, so we're good.
It's not my favorite from the movie, easily. My favorite is Be Prepared.
Okay. I'm gonna go with Can You Feel the Love Tonight, just because I think I love that reunion.
Yeah.
Again, I'm that like hopeless romantic. So like Nala and Simba, or like, hey, we're friends, but maybe we're
She gives him those bedroom eyes.
Yeah, she kind of does.
Hungry eyes. Okay, so let's flesh this out a little bit more then, just because like I also. And this is also coming from my wife and I just binged Love and Death on HBO Max or Max now, which is a story about Candace Montgomery, who murdered the wife of the man she cheated on back in history. I don't know the dates of the years. It's 70s, 80s.
1970s?
1970s. And it's her trial. It was her trial. They documented it it's very fascinating, very graphic, very violent. That's not what we're here to review. But so I'm coming off watching that show and just like the psychology and the court case of that, and just the interview and the interrogating, and she goes and sees a therapist, and so all that. So I'm coming off watching something else that's based on trauma.
Yeah.
Because the character in that show, she essentially summed up the reason why she kind of blacked out and did the 41 whacks onto the lady that she murdered, was because she was triggered into a specific action, and she just all of a sudden anyway. So that's why I'm coming fresh off of that. So just Timon and Pumbaa, you've got these two characters that now come into play. So do is there any dialogue or is there any interaction that you see, or do you see Simba ever exhibit signs of trauma up until we see Nala come in the picture, or
Yeah.
okay, so
The big one is where they're laying out in the stars. Pumbaa asks Timon and Simba, "What do you think those are?" Timon says, "They're fireflies that got stuck." Timon says, "That's weird. I always thought that they were great big balls of gas." And then it goes to Simba, who said, "A wise man once told me that it's the kings watching over us, great kings watching over us." And Timon laughs at him about this. And Simba kind of like suppresses his like uncomfortable embarrassment. Yeah, it is kind of silly, ha ha ha. And then he goes off to be with his own thoughts. I think that's very emblematic of somebody who hasn't yet processed the trauma.
Yeah.
For the last year or two, he's been avoiding it.
So can we talk a little bit about because again, this just kind of hit me when you look at it now, you see the way that Pumbaa is because he's talking about the whole song when I was a young
yeah.
and he's talking about but to him he sang about, so obviously that was kind of a big deal, and then Simba is talking about his stuff, but if I'm honest with you, Timon's kind of a jerk, like he's not a good friend.
Timon's a terrible friend.
He's a terrible friend because he's belittling and again, I've been in those situations. I've had people in my life that I thought were really good friends, and come to find out, just talked down and kind of made everything a joke, and even the whole Hakuna Matata means no worries. I mean, that's kind of the essential. Hey, don't worry about it. Just brush it off. Just come eat some grub with us.
Sweep it under the rug.
Yeah, but I look at it, and it's like Timon is. It's like he tries to be the mastermind of that trio, and it's like he's probably the most insecure. I mean, again, we're getting in the psychology of fictional characters here, but
it's little man syndrome.
It absolutely is,
and he's
a
little man.
Timon, despite his faults, has always been my favorite from the movie, but I also think I relate to him most. When we're talking philosophy and stuff,
it means no worries.
I can really get into that. But when we start to talk about real, these are issues that I'm dealing with, blah blah blah, I'm not good at being a friend in that environment.
I get that.
Yeah.
Not saying I agree. I'm saying
I understand.
I get that.
Yeah. So I sympathize a bit with Timon here, but yeah, he's bad at being a friend in this way for sure.
To be 100%. Fair, he's got one of the biggest redemption stories in the movie.
Yeah, he dresses in Dragon Does the Hula.
That's exactly it.
And it is safe to assume now. We're splitting hairs here, but scientifically, meerkats do hang around warthogs because they eat the fleas and stuff off the back.
Yeah.
So scientifically, those animals do run together, but
symbiotic relationship.
Both of them, we can also assume, are not with the people that they originally were raised with or grew up with or born with.
Right.
So we
don't see any other warthogs, and we don't see any other meerkats.
We don't hear about their trauma. We almost hear about Pumbaa's.
Yeah,
that's true.
But
he can clear a savannah after every meal.
Yeah.
He's a sensitive soul.
All right, we have to pause there for a second because
thin skin.
We keep mentioning Pumbaa's fart. This is the first time Disney farts in a movie.
Yeah,
and I
did not know that.
I think that's great. Yep.
That's pretty amazing.
Pumbaa is the first fart for a Disney movie.
Pumbaa, there's kids listening. Sorry.
But anyway, I think it's, if this was a Christopher Nolan live action drama thriller, I feel like there would be. I feel like I would want more of the how does Simba's story relate to Timon and Pumbaa's, because they're also in an orphan type situation that we know nothing about.
And none of them, I mean, when you look at just from the Nat Geo side, none of those animals are native to the type of environment that they run away to.
Right.
So
those are all savanna animals.
Yeah, exactly.
Savanimals, if you will.
Savanimals. I love that. Yes.
Savannah. Reliant K. Anyways, I know it's not the main overarching storyline of the film, but trauma and the actions we make from trauma, the choices we take from trauma, it was a driving force through the center of through the middle meat of this movie. It wasn't until Rafiki said the past still hurts.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to just forget about it, but you can move on from it.
Right.
That resonated with me. It just brought that trauma to a full circle with me within that line. And then all of a sudden he's like, I've got to go redeem my family.
Rafiki was kind of like I mean, you're looking at like, it's more African culture, more African, like, obviously you can look at, which we could go back and into the discussion, we won't, but like you could even go into the circle of life from the theological, I mean, in that sense. But like Rafiki would have been our equivalent of like Simba's like pastor, because I mean he's the one that essentially
spiritual guide.
He was like he was like the Paul to Simba's Timothy, if you will.
Yeah.
He was a spiritual mentor. And I love when he's like, something about, my dad died long ago. Nope, wrong again. It's like, and I love when he says he's alive, and I show him to you. And I feel like he said
James Earl Jones gets another Forest Ghost.
Yes.
That's Mufasa.
You are my And then again the epic line that he says from which I thought was the most awkward scene ever, but it was also heart-wrenching. When Mufasa shows up in the clouds and he's like, remember who you are. But it's so good because Rafiki's killer. I love that dude.
So
Rafiki's the only character that uses a non-American or English accent. He actually uses a accent that's as close to Swahili or African culture compared to all the other ones just having American or English accents.
That's fair.
While we're bagging on Timon, and I know we've already moved past that, but I'm bringing it back to that. When Timon and Simba first meet, Timon says, "Bad things happen, and there's nothing you can do about it, right?"
Wrong.
And Simba says, "Right." And Timon says, "Wrong. When the world turns its back on you, you turn your back on the world." And then they go into Hakuna Matata, which is very much the opposite of turning your back on the world.
Yeah.
Like Hakuna Matata, the way I understand it, right? It's Swahili for there are no problems. It's like everything's water off a duck's back. You're just like, whatever. That's not turning your back on the world. Turning your back on the world is very jaded.
Yeah.
It's very like
pessimistic.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on this circle of topics here? I got one. Some I want to throw at you, Nelson, and then you two to just kind of break down because you mentioned it before, but I just want to make sure I wasn't.
Yeah. I've only got one more thing I want. Well, two more things.
So Scar, and then I'm saying this and then throwing it to you guys. Scar, in especially his song, which you mentioned, Nelson, which is
a killer song.
It's a pretty sweet song. It's intimidating. It's
so good.
It's comparable.
You got hyena Nazis.
I was about to say that.
Yeah.
It's comparable to like the "Be a Man" from Mulan. Like it's one of those songs. Like I could work out to this song, even though this one's coming from a villain standpoint.
Yeah,
I could pump some Jeremy Irons to this song. You know. Let's talk about how Scar represents Hitler. Okay, Nelson. So, I hand to you, and then Rick. You're up.
Sure.
It's not even Hitler per se, because Hitler is just one of many political figures who rose to power through a populist movement. The
Chip and Joanna Gaines are another one.
Exactly. That's actually the three.
That's the trio.
That's the unholy trinity.
Adolf Hitler and Chip and Joanna Gaines.
I'm fans, by the way. I'm just saying they rose to power.
We love your work.
Like, the word tyrant comes from
Shiplap.
the word. The word tyrant comes from a group of rulers during the antiquities in Rome, and they were the tyrants. But what people often miss is that the tyrants came to power because they were popular. Everyone loved them. And if you look through history, everyone that we call a tyrant got to power because people loved them. Charismatic populist movement. Yep. They harness an energy among the dissident portion of the population, get people riled up and anxious. We see it on left and right.
Yep.
And so it's really interesting watching Scar take these dissident contingent of cultural rejects, the hyenas who aren't allowed to hunt in the Pride Lands.
Right. And that is the only thing in this movie that's not National Geographic outside of talking animals.
Yeah.
The whole that
hyenas hunt and scavenge.
Right. This is the one thing where they took some extra liberties with the relationship.
They actually, on that, a hyena specialist actually sued Disney for character defamation of hyenas.
Is that real?
No joke.
I love
every minute.
That's pretty amazing. Yeah.
I love pedantic law.
I love that there's hyena specialists.
Yes.
So yeah, like what I saw in this moment, Mussolini did it. Yes, Hitler did it. Stalin also did it. The tyrants, right? The tyrants did it. Pol Pot. Like you name somebody who's got the death of millions on their hands, they did it. And so when center and left wing people were nervous about Donald Trump's first administration, like there's legitimate reason to be concerned. It was a populist right-wing movement we've seen that go wrong in the past.
Mhm.
There's reason to be concerned. Now, thankfully, he was not. From what we saw in his first administration, that wasn't the case. If he were to get a second administration, who knows, right? You can't predict the future.
Right.
But what I saw happening in that scene was this guy, he recognizes what these people are frustrated about, and it's like, yeah, you help me get in power, I'm going to make that right. You're not going to have to worry about that anymore. And so what I saw there was tyrant in the classic definition and the historic definition, like this guy who's taking a ragtag dissident group. I'm going to put you in power. All you got to do is support me. And then they have a coup.
Yeah.
So
And what a coup it was.
What a coup it was.
a chicken coup.
Yeah. Do you think that interpretation of the character or that type of tyrant, like, do you think it goes more in depth than what you discussed, or do you think it's just kind of at that surface level? Just because, like, growing up, I knew who Hitler was. You know, like so for me, like this was a very
So yeah, I would say,
this was a very obvious imagery.
yeah.
You know, it wasn't one of those things that was kind of under, like, this was very like, okay, he's standing over while a bunch of people are marching, high stepping in line. Like, this is Hitler. Like I've seen this in many, like, so just like, but do you think like he fulfills that character throughout the movie, or do you think it's just within, like, I don't know. Do you think it, I don't know how to ask this
So
question.
I'm going to answer what the question you're
Yeah,
asking and the
thank you.
question that you want to ask but haven't found the words for.
Appreciate that.
So the question that you want to ask but I don't think found the words for is, are all populist leaders tyrants? And that's...
You've read my mind.
So, with very limited exception, all tyrants are populist leaders.
They probably couldn't get into that position.
Yeah, so...
Like, it's almost impossible to get into that position without having...
Yeah, because almost always the tyrant populist leader is coming from outside the political machine.
Right.
With limited exception, tyrants are populist leaders. The inverse is not true. Most populist leaders are not tyrants. Most populist leaders are people that, to one degree or another, I think they're just naive about the political process. And so they think that they can make a change when, if the political machine doesn't want you, it's not going to have you. You can trick it once, but you can't trick it twice, which we saw in 2020, right?
Right.
So yeah, I would, to answer the question that I think you were trying to get at, I think that we don't need to be scared of all populist leaders. Now, to answer the question that you got more towards, is this an accurate portrayal of a tyrant's behavior? I think so. People look for different things in leadership, and depending on the populist movement, different things are required. So, for example, Adolf Hitler, incredibly passionate about the fact that we got sold a raw deal in how we had our peace treaties after World War I. We need to make that right. We need enough land so that we can be autonomous. And in order to do that, we're going to invade Poland. We're also going to get rid of anybody within our borders who is actively working against us. And since the Jewish people are a lot of our bankers, and by their own tradition, they charge interest to the rest of us, but not to each other. And they make up for not charging interest to each other by giving us higher interest. Like, they're ruining our country. So, like, there was a method to his madness. Right? Like, yeah, he was wrong. He was very wrong about a lot of things. But, like, what he was saying resonated with the people that were frustrated. And we saw that similarly with other populist movements, where what the leader-to-be had to say, people were like, yeah, I agree. I'm with that. And that's, honestly what made me nervous with Trump, is some of the things he was saying, which I strongly disagreed with. A lot of his base were like, 100%, yes, that, more of that. I couldn't get on board. And so I think the movie did a really good job there. One thing that, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other with tyrants is, are they true believers, or is this pursuit of power? You can't know the mind of a man. At best, we can assume. With Scar, because it's fiction, we know explicitly what his motives are. I don't think...
A lovely bunch of coconuts.
Exactly. I don't think Scar cared at all about the hyenas and whether or not they ate.
Oh, and he showed that very clearly when we got to the end.
Yes.
Yeah, like he very much threw them under the bus to save his own behind.
Yeah.
So no, I'd agree with that.
Now, did Hitler genuinely believe that the Jewish question was the problem with Germany and that they got sold a raw deal? If you read Mein Kampf, it certainly seems that way. But who knows? Right? Who knows if he genuinely believes what he was saying, or if it was just like, hey, if I tell the people this, I know they'll get on board and I'll be in power. Hard to say.
Yeah.
We like to make out our villains to be as villainous as possible.
Yes.
I think in real history, our villains are much more human than we like to admit. And the reason we don't want to admit it is because they're more like us than we like to admit.
That's tough to hear, man. But I agree with you.
Basically what I'm saying,
Yeah.
Jeff, you're basically Hitler.
That's what I heard.
It's the
Literally
It's
Hitler.
the mustache.
Yeah,
It's the
it
mustache.
is totally the mustache.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
enough of my soapboxing on tyrants.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about Scar's rise to power?
You know, Scar was literally the antithesis. He was everything that Mufasa was not. And I love what you said too, because I think it's so true, is that what I've seen, and I've seen it both in left and right, is this desire to try to relate with the common person when we know they just don't. Scar tries to do that with a group that he literally has no affiliation with whatsoever.
Right.
But he tries to speak as if he does, as if he knows their struggles. We do continue to see that. Why my personal struggle with the political spectrum or circus, whatever you want to call it, that we're seeing
Can I
right
interject
now.
for a moment?
Please do.
Having just discussed Hitler and Mein Kampf, I think when you say my struggle, that's a poor choice of words. Mein Kampf translates to my struggle.
Okay, well, in this
You can
moment,
read that
ignorance
in-
is bliss.
You can read that in Rick's book below, My Struggle.
My
Below
struggle.
yes.
Just kidding. No, anyways,
So
continue. Yeah.
no. So I think so for Scar, and this is what's so hard to. And I mean, there was a part of me that was like wanting to geek out and go into like defining, the term that we often, as at least as a Christian, we often portray gospel, and we see that as gospel is a Christian term, and it's
Kirk
not.
Franklin.
It's not.
It's a music term.
It's a music term, yes. But no, like gospel, and I guess we'll go there. Like gospel was essentially campaign slogans for the emperors of Rome and of other countries, and basically how they're gonna. I'm not saying this to attack my right wing, but like basically this is how we're gonna make Rome great again, right? And then here comes along Jesus, and as Christians we preach this gospel of a poor carpenter, a self-proclaimed rabbi who
who was murdered by the state.
who was murdered by the state.
Yeah.
And that's our gospel. Hence why Paul says that our gospel is foolishness to the Gentiles. Anyway, so we can get into that. But like, what's interesting about that is, in the end, tyrants. Nelson, you summed that up pretty good, dude. And
Thanks.
but I would say that tyrants are always out for themselves. And I've seen leaders both left and right that say they're for the people or they're for America, and they are not, because they are quick to throw anybody who disagrees with them under the bus. And we have seen that several times in the past several administrations.
You're a very nasty woman.
Yeah. But it's so I
don't get
see
it.
it. I don't get it. So I just say it, like I see Scar, and yeah, I do see him. But we got to remember too, though, like this is in the early '90s. So yes, this could have been Hitler, because that's who we think. You have was it North Korea, I think, or South Korea, whichever. Back then would have been kind of a threat, if I'm not mistaken. I mean,
It's North Korea. They're still a threat.
they are still. But my point is,
They're less of a threat today because
but
they've
my-
starved themselves.
But my point is that we're automatically, which yes, it could be Hitler, but this movie was made in the '90s, so it could have been a throwback to Hitler. But I mean, that's not the only.
And the big lesson not learned about 1920s Germany is that it can happen anywhere.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? Like people like to think, oh, if it were me, I would be hiding the Jews. No, like statistically, you'd probably be like, yeah, let's get rid of those Jews. They're terrible.
And if I could say this too, like I don't mean to cut you off. I get kind of
Please do.
passionate, but I also try to make my words few in this because But Hitler, I was talking with a good friend of mine, and we actually looked it up.
Adolf Hitler's a good friend of yours?
No, not at all.
gonna write that
that was my
down.
struggle. But no,
Good callback.
Good call. But no, for me as a man of faith, as a particularly a follower of Jesus, it infuriates me when people use religion for their cause. And Hitler did that.
Mhm.
Hitler essentially said, that basically this is I don't know word for word, but this agenda is the will of God. And again, we continue to see that. And I am never going to question somebody's, like, it is beyond my pay grade to question where someone stands with Jesus. But I think it's important to see too, and it's kind of a sidebar, I guess, but for me, it infuriates me how easily God can't be mocked or manipulated, but we tend to use him as a piece in our campaigns, and sometimes our actions
Right.
are far from that.
I need to pull up a quote because what you just said reminded me of something that my brother-in-law said to me earlier today. A quote from Jeff Durbin. Are you guys familiar with Jeff Durbin?
I've heard the name.
No.
So Jeff Durbin, he's one of the two big faces of Apologia Studios. They started out as a drug rehab missions organization. He himself was an addict as a young man. Apologia has really branched out in a lot of different ways. They do apologetics, like street debates. They're not just speaking about issues that I agree with. They're speaking about these issues with authority and knowledge that like I wish I had.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff Durbin recently, 2015, he said, "We've adopted an unbiblical worldview on things like drugs, war, etc., because the Republican Party has identified itself as the, quote, Christian party."
Mm.
That's not to say that if you're a Christian and you're a Republican, you're wrong. That's not what his point is.
Yeah.
That's certainly not what I'm saying. But to piggyback on what you said, where we bastardize the gospel when we leverage faith for politics.
Yeah.
Hitler did it. That doesn't mean that everybody that does it is literally Hitler, right? Because we saw Obama do it as well as who he was running against at the time, McCain, right?
Mhm.
Like just politicians like to leverage Christianity for why what they're talking about is good, oftentimes ignoring the majority of the gospel.
Right.
Right, like
Right.
Republicans are war hawks. That's not in the gospel,
Right.
right? But like at the same time, the Democrats are advocating for genocide of the womb, which is not in the gospel, right?
Correct.
So
Well, and I think on that too, man. Like, and Nelson, you and I have talked about this. Like, anytime any political ideology tries to take on, and I've had conversations and I've read text messages where someone sent me an explanation as to why the Republican or the Democrat Party is God's chosen party, and
right,
and I stray away from any political ideology that tries to take the stance of this is God's ordained political ideology. I stray away because I see strengths and I see a lot of weaknesses from both of the two popular ones, but I see.
Yeah.
So I mean, we could go on about that, but it's just one of those things, like you said. It's and again, it goes back to like where my political thing just stance is that I am. It sounds so out there, I guess, but like really just trying to align my views with the policies of the kingdom. So
Yeah.
and that's a whole nother. I know we could get into that, but like that's
I'd love to. I love getting into that,
yeah, but
it's
yeah.
a bit beyond the scope of
it
Lion
it
King.
is a little bit.
I would say, just to kind of like cap off the conversation of like why X party is God's chosen party. Let's assume that they're right. If they're right, then that party does not require my support. They've already got the support of God Almighty, and He's going to make it happen.
Fair enough.
Right? So, like, when people say that, like, I could get into the minutia of why you're wrong.
That's a good point.
And I would love to. I love to do that. But it's also like, okay, well, if you're right, then my lack of support will change nothing.
Yeah. Again,
And my support would also change nothing.
and for the sake of wanting to cap that off, Scar's a villain, one of the coolest villains, but he had Hitlerish tendencies and he was a tyrant.
Hilarious.
Hilarious.
It was hilarious.
Yes.
I had just a parallel that I wanted to throw out there, but
Yeah.
From the three of our perspectives, we don't have a hard time taking some of this stuff and putting it into how we relate it to how we see the gospel, how we see our moral views and stuff like that. So, but in just looking up facts about this movie I didn't really pick up on it until after reading it, but I think I kind of find out obvious now is like Simba has this kind of Moses-like quality. It doesn't get compared to the story of Moses a lot, but like,
Interesting.
but
Yeah.
like, but it came up in some of the articles I was reading. Just I can see. I don't think it's not the story of Moses. It's not the
He's responsible for a death, runs off to the wilderness
right. It's not the Prince of Egypt
until
movie.
he's an adult and comes back.
But,
Yeah.
and he comes to free his people, because
that's
they
fair.
are enslaved. It's a minor thing, but
Does that make Nala God? Or is she just a burning bush? There's a STD joke in there somewhere, but I'm not going to make it.
Yeah, I'm going to bite my tongue on that one.
I don't have a hard time taking movies and making Christian parallels, but this one, like, I was just kind of glossing over because of all the other ones that we've already talked about that are just so prolific. I'm like, he didn't get sent off; he kind of sent himself off. But like,
well, nor did Moses.
right?
Moses ran
that's
away.
True. That's true. So yeah, I want to throw that there is some parallel
Yeah, that's interesting.
from the historical
Rick, you
character
are
of
our
Moses.
current resident Bible expert, professional Christian.
Oh, stop it.
Um,
No, keep going. It's fine.
would-
I'm kidding.
Can you go in and as a big fan of Lion King, can you go in a bit more of maybe some of the parallels that we missed? Like responsible for a death in his own view, runs off into the wilderness, returns to free his people. Is there more beyond that?
See, I wouldn't have even seen it as the Moses comparison. I actually saw it a little bit closer to home with us. Funny enough, John Eldridge wrote a book called Fathered by God, and he
Yes.
uses this
Jeff
illustration.
brought this up in a recent episode.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Linked
it's
below.
so killer to think about just the different stages that we go in our own spiritual journey. I mean, because technically you could even compare Simba to Nehemiah, right? Because like he came to essentially rebuild something that had been torn down, So like when you look at that, I understand that, but I'm kind of looking at just off the cuff. The thing that always hits me is just the need for community too, man. Like Simba's got people in his life. He figures out he's got some some moments where he's got some not so great friends at first because he's got people that are experiencing trauma just as he is, trying to figure it all out. So what do? They just go and just eat grub and live that Hakuna Matata life, right? And I've been in those places where, maybe something happened. And I just kind of did it, my season of rebellion. So I kind of look at it as more of just a person. Like I see a lot of myself in Simba, and I think that a lot of people can relate to that. That it is just that journey you go through, and then there's always those people in your life that are willing to hit you over the head when need be, or they're ready to pin you again. Like those moments where you need to just be. And I can say the Nala in my life was definitely my wife, Kate. Like, she's not listening, but
Shout
like,
out to Kate.
Shout out to Kate. We love you.
She's a big fan, actually. She listens to every episode.
Yeah, she does. She's the one that basically talked sense into him and made him realize, like, Rafiki had some kind of influence, but Nala had something. She had something special to him, and he's like, all right,
Chutzpah.
I'm going back,
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I see with it, man, like just off the surface.
Cool. That's all the solid stuff I had.
Yeah, I like that.
Nels, what you got for us?
It's a passing line. So Scar has Simba on the ledge and says, I have a secret of my own. I killed your father. Simba kicks up over the ledge, pins Scar,
Again.
and says, tell them the truth.
Right.
Scar says, truth is in the eye of the beholder. I think, obviously, he's just kind of saying this to get out of the situation. But in the cultural moment where we live, it's very popular to say that there are shades of gray.
It's that
And
truth is relative.
Truth is
argument.
relative.
Yeah.
What do you guys think of that?
Rick, I'll let you
Oh,
take
boy.
this. Yeah.
As the pastor,
Well, as the pastor, I
Only right answers. Please.
only right answers.
and we will be notifying your boss if it's a heretical opinion.
Okay, good. All right, go ahead and do it. No, I'm kidding. Obviously, as from that standpoint, I believe every person has a black and white standard, whether it's true or not. Like for us, I do believe that the scriptures are the final authority in my life. So from where I stand, I understand what they're saying. Truth is in the eye of the beholder. Man, that's a loaded question, man. So here's what I will say on it is, as a Christian, I do hold to the teachings of Scripture as the final authority in my life. If I were speaking as someone who was not of any faith, I understand. I understand where they're going with that, but in the same breath, I just believe that everyone has their own. Gosh, I'm trying to say this so it doesn't sound like it's like universal or even, new age or anything like that, because that's not what I'm saying. But I would say that, again, as a Christian, yes, I believe in the teachings of Scripture. The saying itself, I think, I understand where people are kind of coming from with it, if that makes any sense at all.
It's somewhat of a presuppositionalist argument. Now, not all of our audience might be familiar with the term. Can you kind of flesh out what that means and how it applies here?
Presupposition, so essentially, a presupposition are basically things that you're familiar with, that you've been raised with. So, like for me, my standard of truth is the teachings of the scriptures, specifically the New Testament, the teachings of Jesus. Like that is my standard. That is what I judge right and wrong and all aspects of morality and all those things from. So a presupposition has a lot to do with, I think, the way you're raised, your surroundings,
Lived experience.
lived experience. Yeah,
For people that use those terms.
yeah, yeah. So what else? Like I said, I feel like I'm dancing around. I'm not trying to, but I'm trying to be as understanding of people outside. Like it'd be very easy for me to say, well, there's truth in that statement, and then automatically Rick's a heretic because as a Christian, the Bible, and it's like, no, yeah, it is. But we live in a day where things like my truth or my perspective are a thing, and right, wrong, or indifferent.
Or as Stephen Colbert, the character, not the actor, said, truthiness.
Truthiness. Yeah. So I think that is I think it's a weighted statement. I think there is truth to it, or truth, ironic, to that statement. But man, it is just such a loaded topic to get into, and
It's deceptive.
we're going to go with that because again, it just, as a pastor, you want to understand outside perspectives, but you also have to be very cautious with your words because you don't want to come off as saying, you know what, anything goes. If it's true for you, it's true, because that's not what I hold to.
Right. You don't want to endorse licentiousness.
Yeah, absolutely. Or just you at the end of the day, just believe in something and you're good. Like that's not at all what I believe, and I don't believe.
Ultimately, Jesus just wanted you to be a good person.
Just be a good person and and do nice things, and
Yeah.
you're good. Yeah, kumbaya. So I butchered that question, but I just tried to answer it with the.
I know that early in this conversation you said you're apolitical, but the way you skirted around answering that, I think you got a brilliant future in politics, Rick.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
Jeff, your thoughts.
My definition of truth, my definition, but I would say this is even more broader than that. Like, Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, the life.
Yes.
Like, so for me, like,
no one comes to the Father except through me.
Yep.
Sure.
That's.
Oh yeah, no, I don't read that part.
That's the part B of that.
Yeah, that part doesn't relate to me. That's not my truth. No, no. Anyways, no. But yeah, thank you, Nelson. But so for me, like, I like the vibe of what Scar, or like, because I've heard this statement before. This isn't this. I've heard this before. Scar said it. Like this is a common statement that people say. Like, I like what the intended meaning is.
Right.
But if I could reword it, I would say I would remove truth and I'd put reality. Even though like I could even debate that, but like our reality is what we can define. I'm not talking like science fiction reality, but like the things that we experience and the things that we have to add to other conversations. Those are the things that we behold. So like our own personal reality is what we behold. That's what's in our, like, and those things that we've experienced, those have become truths for us, or like we've experienced, for us as Christians, we've experienced God's truths in the moments we've lived.
Right.
If you believe that. So for some of us, we could believe that, like, okay, if there could be truth in what I'm beholding because I know what I'm beholding, but I don't think it's a blanket statement. I actually 100% believe it's not a blanket statement. And I would just lean more to like, I would remove the word truth. And I would put in reality or some sort of idea of like our own personal experiences are only valuable in the eye of the beholder.
And I think to your point too, which is essentially what I was trying to say, but
you're welcome.
Was we mistake truth with perception.
Yeah.
And absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And ultimately I think that, so I'm glad you said that, because I was like, you can't mistake. Obviously there is an absolute truth. Like I 100% agree with that. And I mean, literally it's tatted on my right arm, 14:6, John 14:6, right? And so, yeah, I love what you said, that like we have to remove truth and put, I think, perception or just understand that there is a difference between perception and truth.
But I do think there is importance in saying though, like, Nelson, your experience, your events that you've experienced in life up to this point, I can't relate to. Even if you shared them with me, even if we talk about, even if I went to therapy with you, whatever it is, like those are my experiences, you know, so I think like the idea of what's that statement again, outside of the Lion King, that statement that's
Right.
it's just used like outside of just that statement alone, like I get the vibe behind
Right.
it, but I don't believe the word truth is what makes that statement truth. I think like it's who we like it's what has made us up to this point. The events that we've interacted in our life, the incursions, the you know like just all these things like that's what's in our eyes as something that no one else can may or may not relate to. So for us, that is our truth. Even if does that make sense? Like I don't think I'm summing it up. Like I started out really good and then I'm dropping it off.
So I think playing off of what you mentioned earlier with perception being reality. My dad has a long history in corporate world. And so in the past when I've had issues with corporate politics in former jobs, I've gone to him for like, "Hey, how do I navigate this?" And one of the things he said regularly is perception is reality. You can't change what they perceive, and what they perceive is reality to them. At best, you can provide them with alternative perception that they may or may not choose to accept. I also disagree strongly with your truth.
Mm-hmm.
It's your perception,
Yes.
right? What you think the world is like.
Yes.
I remember when I'd get arguments with my siblings as a kid, my mom would always say, there are 3 stories. There's your story, there's the story of your sibling, and then there's the truth, which lies somewhere in between. Because both of you have colored perception based on your own biases. Rick, you were tiptoeing onto presuppositionalism, which is an approach used in apologetics when people are defending the Christian faith. One of the things they clarify, and I've actually even heard non-Christian, but like, I believe that there is a God. So it's like a step from agnostic, but not Christian yet.
Yeah.
They even say, like, there's no such thing as atheists. Because all of your morality as an atheist, you've borrowed from Christians. And that's the presuppositional argument. Everything that you believe is right and wrong, you actually borrowed from Christian culture and Christian worldview. And Scripture says the laws of God is written on the heart of man,
Mhm.
right? So when we get into, like, your truth, anything that deviates from God's truth is not truth. It's your opinion.
Oh yeah.
And this is what I'm saying, both as my understanding of what truth is, as well as my understanding of the proper doctrinal understanding of truth is. God is the way, the truth, and the life, and so anything that deviates from that is no longer truth. It is at best fact. And
That's fair.
what I mean by fact is, like, for example, in the past in human history, it has been fact that the Earth was the center of the solar system. Wasn't true, but it was fact, right? It's what we understood to be true. Calling back to our conversation about Return of the Jedi with Nate and Sheldon, Nate was making some points about truth being black and white, and we clarified, like, when we say that, what we're not saying is, I know what is right and wrong. We're saying that there is a right and wrong. That morality has a binary scale. That there isn't shades of gray. At best, there's specificity. So, like, for example, blanket statement, stealing is wrong. In Leviticus, it makes allowance for certain stealing under certain conditions, and if caught, certain repercussions. And what all that means is, this is apart from the blanket statement. That doesn't mean that the blanket statement has shades of gray, it's specific at times. Weirdly, when you say my truth, that actually is less humility than when you say truth is black and white. When you say truth is black and white and I might not know it, that's exercising more humility than this is my truth. Right? That's pride speaking there.
Yeah.
And so I would say, no, truth is not in the eye of the beholder. I don't even really get on board with the whole perception is in the eye of the beholder. I mean, like, literally yes, but like, sorry, reality would be in the eye of the beholder because perception is reality. I don't even really get on board with that. But I do acknowledge that our own biases, our own worldview, our own viewpoints will color how we interpret events as they've happened. But that doesn't mean that it's your truth. It just means we, as humans, have colored and biased opinions of what happened. Maybe I'm splitting hairs there. Your thoughts?
I think, for me, number one, it's always kind of. So I agree with you. The idea of, my truth existing it's not a progressive thought. It's actually a digression. Because regressive. Well, that's yeah. It's actually a very arrogant statement. And it just doesn't make sense. You can't make an absolute statement denying absolute truth. That just doesn't. It just philosophically does not work. And I think the reason, like, I'm going back and really just like thinking through like even my initial response, and the reason that it was kind of tiptoed around is because we're in a culture right now where, and specifically among Christians, we are, and this is a soapbox, real quick soapbox. We have mistaken discipleship for truth dispensing, and they're not the same. In fact, I will be preaching on that in a couple months.
Strongly agree.
That we think that if we just drop truth, that we're doing our due diligence as Christians, and we are missing the point completely. That's not discipleship, and if we're not careful, we're actually harming our witness. Not because if we're not as Christians, if we're not living out the truth that we are so willing and so eager to throw at people, then that truth means nothing in our lives. I guess that's really kind of my soapbox, and the reason behind, to make it just to, if anything, explain the, as you say, the tiptoeing was
the carefulness,
trying to be aware that, especially in this place, and especially as a Christian, especially as a pastor, if I just go out and just say something, because I don't want to be lumped in with the majority of the Christians who are doing those types of things. Like, I just, you know what I mean? Because I think it's harming the progression of the kingdom more than it's helping it. And I think it's a cop-out. I think it's the easy way out, for us just to do that. And so that's why just being very cautious and understanding too that there are people that are listening to this that are not of the Christian mindset, they're not of that worldview, and understanding that I may disagree with your concept of truth. I firmly believe that the truth is not a thing; it's a person. His name is Jesus, right? And I believe that but I acknowledge that there are people that don't feel that way. So how do we try to meet them, where they're at? So, I mean, it was more. I guess it was my final thoughts on that was it was just the idea that, especially as Christians, we are so eager to tell people the truth, usually in a very.
Scripture tells us to speak the truth in love, and we sometimes ignore
we
the
miss
last
the love.
half.
We think that if I can't remember the guy who wrote it, but there's a book that said "Thou shalt not be a jerk," and it comes off that way. It's like, well, I'm just telling you the truth because it's God's word. Well, if they don't know Jesus, to them that's just a book.
Pearls among swine.
Yeah. They don't know any better. So it's like I said, it's the easy way out just to throw Bible verses at people and throw truth and say, well, they're rejecting Jesus, and it's like, no, they just don't like you.
They're rejecting you. Yeah,
they're rejecting you because you're not living out the truth that you claim to be giving them. You're giving them the shell, but you're not giving them the heart. Jesus encompassed truth. He spoke truth, but he lived truth. That everything about what he did was truth. So I kind of went off on a tangent there, a little sidebar, but I wanted to clarify that from my stance that no, I firmly believe that that truth is absolute. And I firmly believe his name is Jesus. I firmly believe that when you examine his teachings and you examine other teachers, there's a lot of similarities to what's said, but there's something that Jesus did that other religious leaders couldn't do, and he lived out what he taught, and he did it in such a way, and that's why that name brings joy or it ruffles feathers.
Absolutely.
So there's my pastor take on it.
Jeff, any final thoughts before we get into wrap-up questions?
I am all out of thoughts.
All right. Well, let's get into it.
All right. Our kind of Woody's roundup of questions here as we finish up the movie here.
Love the reference.
Would you recommend this movie?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, me too.
Absolutely.
Any thoughts on that or move forward?
No.
Cool. All right. Would you change the weighting? It is, let me double check. It is G.
I would not change the weighting.
The weighting? Would you change the weighting?
I would
Rick?
not change the weighting. Elmer
Be
Fudd. Anyway.
very, very quiet.
It's a Gen Z Elmer Fudd there. Yeah. Yeah. It's a character I'm working on. Yeah. No, I agree.
Would you change the weighting?
No, but hit the Gwitty really well.
Moving on.
Anyways, I wouldn't either. Like I do feel like for a G movie, it's heavier than some other G movies I've seen, but not to the point where it changes.
Is that even a rating now, though? G?
It is.
Yeah.
It's just
Is it really?
It's just so rarely relevant.
I was gonna say I feel like it's pretty rare.
I think that if they had gone with the Scar Sarabe lust story, it probably would have ended up being PG.
Yeah,
and I think that would have been a story worth exploring.
Yeah,
but it's a lot to fit into an hour and a half. So.
Well, the live action animated one is 2 hours, and they still didn't do that in there either.
Yeah.
So, PG. Like if I would have said it was PG, I probably would have been like, yeah, that makes sense too. But like, I think G also works well. Like,
yeah,
it's goofy enough, it's funny enough, it's animated enough to where a lot of those tones, like the jump scares, there's not many even jump scares. Even though there's some intimidating scenes, it's not directed in a way where it's like it's there's not jump scenes in there as much as like even like the Super Mario movie, which we talked about and stuff.
So the only way I would say it could be a PG is if you believe the I don't know if you guys have heard that The Lion King actually is one of those movies that supposedly has subliminal messaging. When the smoke clears,
SFX, not SEX.
Well, yeah. So what I'm saying is, I mean, number one,
and they removed that now.
Yeah, it's just silly. But
so it's spelled out SFX, which is sound effects team. And special effects team, because the special effects team made it and they won.
A calling card.
Yeah, it's not like the subliminal messaging in Little Mermaid, where the spires of the tower are phallic. If you don't know what that word means, ask your parents.
Or it's
yeah, it's
okay.
Don't ask your parents. Jeff just explained it.
You're welcome, kids. Go to bed.
The definition.
I'm gonna quack that out.
Yeah. So has this movie aged well?
I think it's aged really well. I think the animation is strong and has stood up to CGI really well.
I agree.
Hands down.
It's a beautiful watch. Like I would compare it to like even more so than the live action version of this movie. Like I would compare this movie to like when we go into the Black Panther scene where T'Challa is with his dad. Like just that the colors, the vividness.
Yeah.
But you also get some of those like old African symbolic type
Kings
like,
and the Stars, that kind of
like
thing.
Just like I love the Black Panther movies, and in this one, like I throw in that like it's the same. It could be put in the same categories. Like
Simba's basically Black Panther.
Yeah, and like so like I
think I just loved it even more.
I thought it's aged very well, and like I think it's a beautiful movie. And I'm a Hans Zimmer fanboy, so like I mean like the music, the storytelling, the overcoming and stuff like it's a beautiful movie.
I mean I didn't say this earlier, but like I just really respect and I could be wrong on this completely, but I feel like at least when it came out, I feel like Lion King was one of the first movies where they kind of branched out from the mold. Like they were doing like Cinderella, Snow White, like it was basically this, and then it's like with Lion King, they didn't try to fit one culture into like white America, if you will. Like they went and like we began to see more of that, and I feel like Lion King was when they started to make the shift towards being a lot more culturally aware of the diversity and trying to match that. So like hands down, one of the best, or I think one of the most iconic songs that is in the Disney vault of any kind is Circle of Life. It's just an iconic, like you hear that, it still gives me chills.
And it got radio play too. So like I mean, it made it out of just this is a song from a musical. It's like it was, and that was one of Elton John's goals. Was like I want this movie to transcend just the movie screen. Like I want this radio worthy, and it did.
So
animation wise, it's top of the game.
There's a lot of truth to what you said, and I'm going to try and link below a video I've seen on this before. Don Bluth was an animator for Disney, and he did a lot of their iconic stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, memory's failing me, I think he was looking for a promotion that he didn't get, and so he spun off and did his own thing. and the stuff that he did when he was doing his own thing, like it overshadowed Disney by a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Secret of Nim, An American Tale, Land Before Time, All Dogs Go to Heaven,
Great.
Anastasia,
That's all
Titan
him?
AE,
Great
all
movies,
Don
by the
Bluth
way.
Productions.
Anastasia is an amazing movie.
And Lion
Yeah.
King was like Disney had its dry spell of trying to like make movies that just weren't quite succeeding, right? In that era, Little Mermaid, Rescuers Down Under, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin,
When did Aladdin come out?
92.
Really?
Aladdin and
Wow.
Lion King both made it to the top 250.
Yeah.
But those other ones, like Little Mermaid, a lot of people have a lot of appreciation for. Beauty and the Beast too. Rescuers Down Under is nobody's like top Disney movies.
It's a great
That's
movie.
an
though.
underrated movie, man.
It's a great movie.
It
though.
is, but like, it's the animation, like
Agreed.
it's not
Yeah,
as crisp,
yeah.
not as clean. It's not
a-
the same.
Yeah.
And so then in 95 you get Pocahontas, a little later Hunchback of Notre Dame, Hercules, Mulan, Tarzan. So starting with Aladdin, this is like the Disney Renaissance era. That's what they refer to it as. But Don Bluth leaving really, really hurt Disney. So when you observe, like Lion King seemed like out of the ordinary, it was more that it was a return to form.
Well, you know what's interesting about that? I was reading about this too. Is that essentially the animators behind, like the top animators of that day from Disney were actually pulled to do Pocahontas, and so Lion King was essentially the B team, which is pretty awesome because
They didn't think it was going to be as successful, and
Exactly.
they were very wrong.
They were very wrong. In fact, I would put Lion King over Pocahontas.
Oh,
Pocahontas,
absolutely.
another great example of a 14-year-old Disney princess.
Yes. Okay.
Would this movie be in your top 250?
Personally, no. I like it. I think it's a good movie. I think people should watch it. I don't think it's in the top 250 movies ever made.
I would. I'd definitely put it in my top 250.
This movie's taken number one so far for me.
Really?
This movie beat out. Yeah, I after rewatching it, and I haven't watched it in a while. I've listened to the soundtrack many times throughout my adult life, but this is the first time I've gone back to this movie, the animated one. And I loved it. I enjoyed every minute of it. I was singing along. I was watching it by myself too. I was singing along. I had my phone. I wasn't even distracted. Like I was into it. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, this movie still slaps. So yeah, this would absolutely be in my top 250.
Okay.
And maybe I'm just that right age because it hit me when I was young, and now it's hit me as a father, and it's hit me in different.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's just like
No,
it's just like it's
legit.
this movie's great. That's it for that.
One last question. Rick, I know you've listened to a few of our episodes, maybe several even. So there's one last thing that hasn't been discussed yet.
Yes, has
It needs
not come
addressed.
up at all.
Rick, have you ever seen A Clockwork Orange?
I have not,
Okay.
but I was.
If you go back to
was
that episode, I
informed.
think you'll hear me say, worth the watch, hard to watch.
Okay.
That's his take.
That's my take. Jeff's
Worth-
take is
Don't
not worth the
watch.
watch and hard to watch.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then, Rick, unfortunately, won't be able to pipe in on this too much. They share no cast. They share no production team that we know of. Do you think there are any thematic similarities between A Clockwork Orange and Lion King?
I was not prepared for this one.
Didn't see it coming.
I should have. There's circles in both movies. Like a circle of life, and then like
Orange. Orange is in it.
And an orange is a
there's
circle.
There's
Yeah.
circles, and there's wheels on the cars that are in the Clockwork Orange.
And
Those
clocks are circles.
Yeah.
That's some strong comparison.
No, I honestly being put on the spot here, and I should have been prepared for this question, but I didn't once think about this Clockwork
Yeah.
Orange in this.
I'd say the only area that they even remotely overlap is actually somewhere where they simultaneously diverge very strongly. Morality and consequences. In Lion King, it's very clear what the consequences are for actions, and there's a strong sense of morality. In Clockwork Orange, there's the opposite. A lack of consequence, a lack of appropriate justice and consequences for actions. There is consequences, but like our main character, Alex DeLarge, kind of gets out of it in a lot of strange ways. So both movies really tackle morality and consequences, but from very different viewpoints. And we've now tied Lion King into how it's like a Clockwork Orange, which fulfills our secondary mission in this podcast of
Quid
making
pro quo.
Well done.
all movies about the Clockwork Orange.
Yes. Well, as we wrap up, gentlemen, this has been great. You've been a wonderful guest, and may or may not be the last time you're on here. We'd love to have you back. This was a great conversation.
It was good.
Join us in a week.
Join us in 1 week, and if I can, a little PSA here. I need to say, if our last couple episodes have seemed a little off, all of our writers are currently on strike, so we've been having to come up with our own content. So I just want to make sure, like, you guys are still well. We didn't want to miss an episode, and we actually are going into more episodes. But we've lost all of the writers from our Silver Screens Bias studio that we have here on our production site.
Yeah.
In our big conglomerate.
Couple dozen
building. Yeah.
writers.
Yeah.
So just bear with us. You know, we're hoping for the best with that whole situation, and we'll get our writers back, all of them. And but
If
yeah,
any
so
of
just,
you want to scab, we'll take you on in a heartbeat.
yeah. But so yeah, just I jest, but
So join us in a week for how to train your
your
dragon.
dragon, yes,
Not just a dragon.
your
Your.
dragon.
Your dragon.
Thank you guys.
Thanks.
Thanks.